Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Studios. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. Good to be here. And all systems appear to be running normally, although my awesome white gator shirt is throwing a lot of color back at you, so you might want to put those sunglasses on before we get much further. Good to be here. Let's see. I think maybe so for those of you who watch the show recorded, which is virtually all of you, I got to stop reading the comment section while I'm trying to think. We run a series of openings from TV shows that I grew up with, and many of you grew up with them too. And we can't run that live stream to YouTube, but we can do it on Twitch. So we run that for the Twitch audience. Then we switch over and do the dual streaming that we're doing now to Twitch and to YouTube. And I was watching these TV show things again, and I was there were just a couple moments in them. You didn't have to see the pre-roll to know this stuff. So just a little trivia question for you, just kind of get going on our entertainment show tonight. For those of you who didn't see the pre-roll, can you name two science fiction TV shows that had kind of a soft reboot and had their theme song changed while they were during their run? Okay, so the answer is Lost in Space, where between season 2 and 3, they completely redid the opening graphics, redid the costumes. They got the Jupiter 2 off of the planet, put it back out in space again. And this first theme was by John Williams, which was kind of, syncopated and eerie and weird. And then they went to the second one, which is not as distinctive, but is, in fact, a lot more energetic and a lot more kind of heroic. Edward Smith says, did the remake work better? No, it didn't in either case. The third season of Lost in Space was probably prettier, but it just got stupider as time went on. The real winner was the first season in black and white. The first couple episodes in Lost in Space was kind of a serious sci-fi thing. I look back on those now and oh, no wonder I love that show so much. I look back on the Dr. Smith thing, and it's like, did I ever, yes, that John Williams, although he was called Johnny Williams then. Did I ever really dig this show? And Dr. Smith, oh, the pain, oh, my back, oh. But when you look at the first couple episodes, which is what I saw, and they're getting in the suspended animation tubes and stuff, and they're bitching Mylar jumpsuits just like the Mercury astronauts. I thought it looked great, and I thought it was really cool. It's still for kids, but it was reminding me why I liked it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is a show that had a big effect on me because we opened the premiere for it at the Miami Planetarium. I wanted to work on that show really badly. It was shot in England, and I almost had a chance to do it too. So the second series that changed their theme song was Space 1999. And a couple people are saying, Johnny Williams? Yeah, that was John Williams, the very same John Williams. Space 1999 only ran 2 seasons. And again, the similar kind of thing with the theme songs. The first one was kind of real syncopated and kind of choppy and eerie and weird. And then they went for the reboot on the second season. And again, they went with something a little more melodic and heroic and things like that. Didn't save it. Lost in Space, didn't get noticeably worse between seasons 2 and 3, but the second season of Space 1999 was just awful. Awful. It was never really good to begin with. It was just, that was the Sahara of science fiction right then in the mid to late 70s, just nothing there. Before Star Wars came out, there's just nothing. From 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968 to Star Wars in 1977, the Great Desert. You had Logan's Run, Silent Running. Neither one of those were particularly great. Keir Dullea made an appearance on a science fiction show called, I think, The Star Lost, and all of it was shot on videotape, and the videotape back then just looked so terribly crummy. And we're just sitting there, waiting for something, and then bam. we just got the, kapow. We got the Star Wars and then everything after that, and then get the second Star Trek movie, and off we went. The other couple things I noticed just watching their shows, the opening for Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea has a shot of the sea view just descending, just vertically descending, and it's going pong, ping, 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 and that sonar sound is so cool. It's just the coolest sound ever, and that's how submarines are supposed to sound. Damn it! But when I heard a real submarine sonar, I was mightily disappointed. There's it's like a real high whistle. It's like a rising tone and then a steady, and it's not nearly as cool as the boom, boom, boom. And I remember, let's see, always like the time tunnel. The Invaders was a weird show, but the opening of the Invaders, these aliens look exactly like us, but they made a mistake with the replication and their pinky. They didn't get the left pinky right. So whenever you saw somebody with their pinky off to the side like that, you knew you're dealing with people from another planet. Because you want to sweat the details, otherwise you give it away. I guess that's about it. It's just I don't know. I actually wanted to, and I will someday when I get my some time back. I really opened that up a lot. I saw a lot of cartoons and stuff like Journey to the Center of the Earth and the Fantastic Four cartoons, and I just remember that time very well. Dante2K over in YouTube says Lost in Space and Time Tunnel were my favorites. Mine too. And I saw Lost in Space years and years and years before I ever saw Star Trek. I was in Bermuda, so I don't even know if I saw Star Trek in Bermuda. But when I first saw it, I said, okay, there you go. There you go. And still, I think Star Trek, the original series, has given more people more to think about than any other show in history, TV show, science fiction show, certainly. Anyway, so that was that. I had done a couple of test renders of advancing with these planets, and I had a nice kind of approaching the planet, and the reverse shot of approaching the planet, and then rolling kind of into orbit, that kind of thing. And I thought it looked pretty good. And then I got to the close-up shot, and I realized there's just not enough variation here. So I changed the textures. It blends two textures together. Changed the texture. I thought, wow, that looks so much better, and started rendering that. And then the numbers, I just mislabeled the files. So unfortunately, that third part didn't render, so I said, to hell with it. I'm not going to stick around. I'll just get it next time. So there's that. I think two things to talk about. The first one is just plain, cinematic. That's what we try to do on the shows, talk about not just the pop culture, about making movies, writing, how to write, that kind of thing. And so despite the fact that I'm still under this intense burden with the Empire of Terror series, I realized that that's still going to be a while before that gets done, and I got to get something out the door, something new for our members. The new right angles are fun and seem to be received well, although the views just go down and down and down. I would really like to know what the actual views on those things are, but in any event, they are what they show them to be anyway. That's certainly how they pay their advertising dollars out. And I'd mentioned this before. I'd want to do a series of really different looking, shot on an iPhone, outdoors kind of thing. Different series of things called "Don't Be an Idiot About ... And I thought, okay, I might as well start blocking one of those out, and so I did. And the first one I thought, well, might as well do something I know well and get excited about to kind of test the format. So I've been thinking a lot and working a little bit on Don't Be an Idiot About Airplanes. And these things are supposed to be, I don't know how long they're going to be. I'm going to try to keep them down to 3 or 4 minutes. I think I could probably do that. if I made myself do it, then I would do it, because that's something you learn as an editor, and certainly as a writer. If you're an editor and you've got 2.5 hours of footage, and and they tell you got to have this at 23 minutes 30 seconds to the frame, then that's what you have to do. Yes, podcasts count. Dave Big Booty. Listening to Right Angles or any of the shows count. Not a whole lot of visual eye candy on the right angles. So anyway. So I wanted this to look different. I wanted it to look a lot more authentic, a lot less produced. So I'm planning on shooting it on an iPhone outdoors with a good mic. But I was thinking about the problem of, okay, so how do you explain airplanes to people? And when I first started thinking about it, I just went right to, well, here's how the control surfaces work and, and all that other stuff. But that doesn't really explain how they fly. I started thinking about people who didn't know much about flying at all. Ask the one question, which sounds so stupid, but it's actually the obvious question. It's just so simple, and it's so important. And I realized, now I got to deal with that issue before I get to the other stuff. The problem is that people look at these giant aircraft, these huge, enormous things, and they're flying through the air, and there's nothing here, right? Nothing here. I think I won't make you wait for this. I think I just happen to have this ready. Do I? Yeah. Let me just do this output here. I'll just do a quick little thing, show you what I've been working on. So, as I said, I wanted to keep it. I wanted to keep it informal, but I also wanted graphics that looked good and and made sense. So, here's just a little thing I put together for that. Don't be an idiot about airplanes. Because like I said, the problem is explaining to people how this nothingness can hold an airplane up. No one's ever done that I'm aware of. Certainly not to the degree that I want to do it. So I did this just to start. It's not a particularly exciting thing. Here it is. Yeah, and Steve Young is in there. Lift plus thrust is greater than weight plus drag equals flight. Yes, the four forces, all that stuff. I thought I'd start right in there. But then I realized, no, that's not helping anybody, because it's not answering the fundamental question. And the fundamental question is, what keeps the airplane in the air when the air is so thin? So I did a little calculations. I will do what I'm going to do on that video, and that is to apologize for using the metric system. It's just that most of the data is easily in metric, and metric's not bad for scientific stuff, but we'll go back to the way God intended when we get rolling. But so here's what I did in order to explain how airplanes fly, to start explaining how they fly. And you're going to see the final slide, but these would all be kind of reveals. All right, so here you go. Okay. Well, that's a little strange. Why aren't you doing... Oh, is it that big? My God, hang on. Yeah. You know what? Let me try this a different way. Hang on a minute. Where did you... See, this thing is just acting very strange. Okay. All right. So let's try this. Because this shouldn't be that big, to be honest with you. Well, it is. All right, give me a second. I'm just going to, give me 1 second. I'll get this, I'll just get this rendered out at a better size, because just looking at the white's not really that impressive. Just take a sec. So again, you got this problem, and the problem is, how do you explain this stuff in a way that, people can get? Image size, yes. Oh my God, it's 8,000 by 8,000. Let's make that. This should be better. So how do you explain that? Well, this is what I'm hoping to think I'm relatively good at. So here we go. And I want this thing to kind of have a sassy edge to it too. Like don't be an idiot about it. I just wanted it to be something a little off-brand. Because the world is changing out there, and I think the content will be as good, but I just want to present it a little differently. All right, let's try this. So, the reason we're talking about this right now is because it's a writing problem. Maybe this would be a little better. There you go, marginally better. So here's the concept that I am trying to get across here. This one, yeah. And a little word play there. And I move this guy up to here. There you go. All right, something like that. Okay, so basically, we'll just leave me there in the background. So basically, air seems so tenuous because it is tenuous. Again, apologies for the metric system. But if you take a cubic meter of air, so imagine a box that's a yard on each side, a cubic meter of air has 1.2 kilograms. That's what it weighs. If there's nothing else in it, just air, that's what it would weigh. Water, on the other hand, would weigh 997 kilograms per cubic meter, and that's 830 times denser than air is. And concrete is 2,400 kilograms per cubic meter, and that is 2,000 times more than air. So the first thing I wanted to get to was, why is it that I can walk on concrete and not fall through the concrete? And I can float in water. I can't walk on water, not yet, I'm working on it. I can't walk on water, but I can be supported by water. So water is obviously not as dense as concrete is, so that's why I'm not able to stand on it, but it's also dense enough to keep me floating. And then air, on the other hand, is essentially nothing. Okay, so then we get to the point. The first thing I have to do is I have to explain that air is tenuous and feels like nothing because we're only encountering very few molecules compared to water and especially compared to concrete. But if you take those scarce air molecules and put them together, they get denser. And when they get dense enough, they have the same characteristic as a liquid. If you make those air molecules and compress that air enough, it gets powerful enough to be concrete. Then I'm going to show something like the Beirut explosion, which is horrific if you haven't seen it. Okay, so what's knocking all the windows in? What's knocking all the dust and the signs off of the top of the doors? It's not the fire from the explosion. That's down there. What's causing all this damage? Air. It's air causing the damage because this expansion is so fast that it's compressed the air, and this wall of air is what moves out and destroys buildings, right? So if you can compress air, you actually have something that's much more solid than what we experience. Now, so that's one way to do it. You can compress air, and if you compress air, it's thicker. Explaining air, I haven't got this obviously written out yet, but these are the basic concepts. Now, directly above our heads is an atmosphere. 100 kilometers of atmosphere. I apologize. Nevertheless, you'll get it. If I take a square meter of ground and put that up, how much does the air above my head weigh? It's kind of a false question, but it's a good question to ask. So all this air above us, what does it weigh? Well, it turns out that if you take a square yard of air, that weighs about 2,200 pounds of air above you. And people hear that and they just think, well, that can't be possibly correct. How come I'm not crushed to the ground? And it's because you can't really say that 2,200 pounds is above you. What it really is it's around you. It's not pushing you down, it's pushing you in. And the reason that we don't feel it is because the pressure inside our bodies is more or less equivalent to the pressure outside the body in the air. And if you change the pressure, the air wants to go where air isn't. Now, this one I'm rather proud of. So, what does that mean? What does it mean that air is everywhere? We can't we can't tell the power of air here because it's not moving and it's not being compressed. We're just so used to it. What does that mean? Okay, imagine that air molecules are a bunch of people, and they're all in a conference hall at a hotel, right? Just kind of a convention room, right? And they're packed shoulder to shoulder, and everybody's standing up, and nobody wants to be there. It's a Michael Moore, lecture or something you really would like to just get out of there. So everybody's in this room, and the doors are all closed, and everybody's just kind of crammed up against each other, right? Now, if I open one of the sliding doors to the adjacent room, if there's nothing in there, then people will start to spill into that space because they don't like being this cramped. And over time, the density of people, how close people are, will be the same in both rooms. The original room, it's got everybody jammed together. People don't like being jammed together, so they go into where the people aren't, and more of them go in there until finally the amount of people is the same on both sides of the door. If, on the other hand, you open that sliding door and people are more jammed together in there than they are in here, then people will start coming in this way, right? So this is the idea, right? Is explain the idea that air is finding a way to get into everything. Now, if you take that understanding that there's about a ton of air all around us at all times, and that air is trying to go anywhere that air isn't, then you start to get an idea of the power that's involved here. I've seen something where they took, I don't know if it was a tanker truck or it might have been I think it was probably a tanker. I'm talking about a railway tank, right? I mean, something just absolutely fantastic. Huge, heavy thing, right, for transporting oil or something like that. And they attached a vacuum hose and they started pumping the air out of it. And this enormous thing, not like a garbage can, it's a huge thing, just sitting there, and all of a sudden just goes. So I'll show a few of those. Just watching these things compress like that. Okay, what is that? What did that? Well, the air on the inside used to be the same as the air on the outside, so it's like two fingers pushing against a piece of tissue paper. As long as the pressure is the same, nobody's punching through. But when you take air away from one side, the air wants to get into the other, and the more of that air you take away, the less there is to push back against this ton of air that's coming down on you, and eventually you'll take enough air out of that thing for the steel to fail, and ka-chunk. If you want to do that on purpose, if you want to make a vacuum chamber, and by the way, you don't have to take all of the air out of that tank, nothing like all of the air, probably just have to reduce it by probably 20% or something like that, right? So it's not completely empty of air, it's just low enough pressure so the thing to come in. All right, so you got that, great. Now, that's what air pressure will do. Now, I want to do another, than being the saucy guy that I am. I said, now, and also being outdoors, maybe I'll be in a restaurant or something. Now, there's another really important little physics demonstration of power air pressure. I'll take a little sip on a straw that I want to talk about, and then I'll take the sip on the straw. And then I'll say, any questions? Well, so look, I'm holding this glass of delicious Coca-Cola, and I suck on the straw, and the Coke goes up the straw into my mouth. Why? Is there a magical force that exists inside that straw? Because that's how we think of it. We know that there's lower pressure, that there's a vacuum in there, and we know when we create a vacuum in that straw, the liquid's going to come up. We always think that we are pulling the liquid up, but we're not. We're not pulling the liquid up. It is not that at all. What's happening is there's less air in your mouth, in the straw, because you've sucked some of the air out, right? And the tons and tons of air pressure that are everywhere want to get inside that straw because air wants to go where air isn't. So in order to get inside the straw, it pushes the Coke down and up into the tube. That's because of the weight of the atmosphere is pushing the surface of that Coca-Cola down because it wants to get inside the straw. There's nothing pulling the delicious Coca-Cola up to your mouth. It's being pushed there by the ambient air pressure of the regular atmosphere because you've reduced the air pressure inside that straw by just a tiny little bit, not by much, right? Now, if you want to get serious about air pressure, you want to build a vacuum on Earth. I will show you a picture of this because most people can't believe it. I couldn't believe it when I first saw it. Let's say you want to do experiments in a vacuum and you don't want to go to space to do it. So let's say you want to find a room and you want to get all the air out of it here on Earth. Hang on a second, because this is really kind of cool. And let's say you want a big one because you got a bunch of stuff you want to do. All right. Well, then you would build a vacuum chamber. Let me see if this is, that's good enough. Yeah, good enough. Did you come in? Come on, baby. Yeah. Okay, so let's say you wanted to build a room and you wanted to suck all the air out of it, right? How sturdy would that room have to be? Would it have to be as sturdy as, like, I don't know, like a brick house or something? Well, here's how sturdy it would have to be. It would have to be this sturdy. That is the world's largest vacuum chamber. It's NASA. And you can see on the inside of it, there's probably just barely enough room to put a lunar module. But look at the structure. That's all reinforced concrete. It's solid steel on the inside, and the doors are what? They look like they're at least 3-4 feet thick, right? In other words, once you close those doors, close the blast doors. Once you close the blast doors on this, and you start taking air out of the inside of that chamber, then the air pressure outside will push down so hard that you need doors that thick to stop it. That's what you need to do to create a vacuum on Earth. And by the way, since lunar dust flies as if it's in a vacuum, it doesn't cause a dust cloud. It flows like water when you look at the moon landing things. In order to do this thing, if it was faked, they don't just need a movie studio. They need a movie studio that's in a vacuum, and that movie studio has to be built like that, and that vacuum chamber has to be big enough to drive a rover back and forth to the horizon for, what was it, an hour? Couple, 3, 4, 5 miles? An engineer told me this. I never forgot it. It is much easier to go to the moon than it is to build a vacuum chamber that size on Earth. So that's the power of air pressure. Now, we're talking about compressing air and uncompressing air. Why do airplanes fly? Airplanes don't fly on compressed air exactly. They don't have compressors on the wing. What is it? Well, the second thing about air is it's all about the density of the molecules. How many air molecules can you get together? And if you compress air, you get a lot together. And if you don't, then you will get, I'm sorry, these super chats come up and I go right off the rails. I'll get to that in a second. So the other way you can do it is to move a bunch of them past you very, very quickly. Then I'm going to show pictures of a hurricane. Generally, a good strong one's 120 miles an hour, right? And you see blowing these trees over. What's blowing those trees over? Well, the wind is. Okay, the wind is doing it. Great. What is the wind? What's it made out of? What's the wind made out of? Well, it's made out of air. It's made out of air that's moving really, really fast. And then I'm going to show what like a F5 tornado can do. And it's pretty terrifying. What's picking up that cow? What's picking up that truck and swinging an entire house around? What's moving it? Air is moving it. Air is moving it because the molecules of the air are moving so fast that it essentially forms a compression, right? Once you get the power of air moving, you've got a real force. So here's where we start to make the point, right? So if you look at the hurricane here, and you see this hurricane blowing things back, right? That's 120 miles an hour. Imagine what a hurricane that was 500 miles an hour would do. It'd just uproot all of the trees, it'd take everything with it. If you had a 500 mile an hour hurricane, it would simply scour everything away. Well, you can think of a person standing there and have a 500-hour wind going past them, or you can think of completely stationary air and have a person moving through that air at 500 miles an hour, and that is precisely the same thing as far as the physics are concerned. So, when you understand the power of air in motion, if you look at this hurricane's blowing 120 miles an hour, right? Small airplane will fly at 120 miles an hour, but the jetliners that you're in are doing 3 times that. That's the power of how powerful, that's how strong air can be when it's in motion, or when something is moving through it. Once you got that, yeah, I know a political animal says your 3-minute video is already at 40 minutes. I don't care. I'm ad-libbing now. This is why it's going to be written and edited and cut. And besides, I'm also explaining things that I can use pictures for. So now we have an understanding, okay, what happens when something moves through the air at 500 miles an hour, or conversely, what happens when 500 miles an hour of air, or when something is moving through the air at 500 miles an hour, same thing. Then one last thing, it's just because this is really important. I'm gonna pre-test this But just to understand the power of the vacuum, because you really need to understand the power of vacuum, I'm going to go find a piece of wood. I'm going to test it in advance. A 2x4 would be great, right? And I want to say, okay, look, here we are. We're at a car wash, one of those self car washes. And here's a 2x4. Let's see what happens when we let go of it. Ka-clong, down to the ground, right? Okay, that makes sense. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to fire up 2 of those super powerful car vacs that they have at these self-serve car washes. Those monsters, the ones that suck up your carpet. Then I'll put one here and one here. I'm going to lift this thing up off the ground. I'm going to hold it out in front of people, right? And I'm going to say, what is overcoming the force of gravity? This heavy thing wants to fall to the ground. We just saw it, right? You know that the vacuum is somehow sticking to it, but what's really happening? Well, what's happening is the air that's all around that 2x4 wants to get into that vacuum tube. And all of these molecules are going there. They want to go where the air isn't. And that's why a wing has lift. Imagine 10,000 of these car vacs on the surface of the wing, each one of them sucking hard like that all the way down. All the air around it and below it is trying to get to where the air isn't. And that's what causes the lift on the wing. And once I can get that straight, then it's a question of just explaining airfoils and flight controls. Because no one has really ever that I'm aware of, has ever gone out at the mystery of why. We always talk about things like we mentioned here, and this is what I thought I was going to do when I started. We'll start with the 4 forces. You have lift and you have gravity. You have thrust and you have drag. And when you have more thrust than drag, you move forward. And when you have more lift than gravity, you go up. And blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't explain anything. Not in a way that people can understand it. We're talking about people, and not just civilians. I mean, it's a revelation for me to see this stuff. When you see it in action, I really think I can make the case that, so to wrap it up, when you're flying to visit your relatives for Thanksgiving, you look out the window, everything seems nice and calm, but it's a 550 mile an hour hurricane out there. And that's no lie. It's 550 miles, it's twice as strong as a tornado. Of that air out there, that's the power that the air has at this moment. And you can't see it because it's invisible, but you are sailing through the equivalent of 3 hurricanes piled on top of each other. And when that air is moving smoothly, everything's fantastic. But when that air is a little turbulent, then you start to feel, oh, we are actually moving through something. That's basically it. So this is like documentary writing. It's a science writing. It's a tough thing to do. I mentioned before the problem I've got with doing the Soviet secret police thing, and that is you cannot get the scale and personalize it at the same time. You have to go back and forth between the two. Either you say 20 million people died, and people go, oh, 20 million people, that's a lot of people, that's terrible. Or you say, this little girl died, and you think, well, that's terrible too, but little girls die all the time. Yeah, now 7 million of these little girls died. You see how that works? That's it. Edward Smith says, who do I think were the scientists who were best at explaining the science? Well, I think everybody's probably going to go to Carl Sagan. I'm trying to think if there's another example. Now, by the way, can I just get this? I know I've mentioned it once or twice before, but can I just get this out there? Neil deGrasse Tyson is not Carl Sagan. Neil deGrasse Tyson isn't Mr. Wizard. He's not even Bill Nye the Science Guy. He is a real. I have not heard anything profound come out of Neil deGrasse Tyson in all the years I've been looking at him, and furthermore, I have heard him say some things that I thought were incredibly stupid. Now, I missed these super chats, so I'm going to scroll up and catch them. Hang on. Everybody, okay, so let me just deal with these because this is the thing I do not want to do. So, super chat time out. Sacred Order of Knightly Valor for 500 yen. This is exactly why an expanding universe is proof that matter is finite. I suppose it is. The pervasiveness of air, you can make the same case that this is much harder. If you can get the air thing, you can get this too. Not only does air pervade everything, but so does space. People think, what? It's like, no. Not only is air pushing into this room to match the pressure of the air outside, but space is pushing into this room too. We live in a sea of space. But space-time is in fact a real texture. It exists. It has existence. There's essentially nothing in it. It's a damn good vacuum, and they occasionally find stars and nebulae, and by the way, all that stuff. But it is essentially emptiness. But the emptiness is something. There is something to put. In other words, you look at space. Space is a place that you can put a molecule into, but at least the space exists. So space-time is real, and that's one way to think about it. By the way, I just wanted to get this out of the way. This, I think, probably the second or third one that I'll do is don't be an idiot about astronomy. And one of the things that's really so common and such a cliche now that it's just got to stop. Now, Wrath of Khan is probably my third favorite movie. Might be my second favorite movie. Aliens is my first favorite movie. And Wrath of Khan is great and has this battle inside the Mutara Nebula, right? And the Enterprise comes out of the clouds, and then this other thing comes through the clouds, and you see them coming out of clouds. Everybody's always coming out of clouds. And more as we watch science fiction, we see more and more of these spaceships going into and coming out of clouds because we've seen pictures of these nebulae, right? Well, unfortunately, two things are at play here. First of all, you could fly right through the densest part of the Orion Nebula, and you could take any part of the densest part of the Orion Nebula, and that would be damn near perfect vacuum, almost perfect vacuum. The thing is light years wide. Some of them are anyway, right? So when you see this cloud, oh, look, a cloud. Well, the cloud is trillions and trillions of miles deep. If you're in the cloud, you have no way of knowing you're in the cloud. That's number one. And number two, the clouds, the pictures that we see of nebula, all the beautiful colors and all the detail and stuff, that is invisible to the naked eye. It's too faint. So if you were to sail right through the Orion Nebula at high speed, what you would see is a gray blob just barely at the limit of your eye to detect. And then essentially the gray blob would fill you up. And then you'd be surrounded by gray, and then it would go away. And the reason we know this is true is because we are inside a galaxy. And even though we're completely surrounded by the stars in the galaxy, we're inside the pancake, right? Even though we're completely surrounded by stars, when we go out at night, we can see the galaxy, but it's damn faint. That's the Milky Way. The Milky Way is all of the stars in our galaxy, 200 billion of them, and it's just barely detectable to the naked eye. You certainly can't see it in a city. You have to be someplace nice and dark. No, it's nice and dark. It really stands out, but it's not bright. So what I'm saying is, whenever you see a spaceship coming out of a nebula, two things are wrong. Number one, the nebula is not bright enough to be seen with the naked eye. And number two, the nebula is so enormous that you don't come out of it. If you had that kind of density in there, your ship would probably just explode. In fact, it certainly would explode. If you had the density, if you ran something into a cloud, a real cloud, not even a rain cloud, a cumulus, nice puppy cumulus cloud. You run a spaceship into that at the speed of light or half the speed of light or something like that. Boom. So that's something that's disappointing, but it's something that we have to nip in the bud, Andy, because more and more, and my God, Star Citizen has just, as usual, just gone so far over the edge on this. It's like now everything's in a gas cloud, and everything's because it's apparently more cinematic. I personally don't see it that way. The reason I like space is because there's nothing in it. And just as another quick aside, I once saw a really awful movie at Planetarium, an IMAX show. It was just terrible. Most of them are. But it was in 3D. And for the first time ever, I saw like this spaceship, fairly wide shot spaceship in the middle, stars in the background. And I thought, oh, but when you see it in 3D, you realize, oh my God, that spaceship is not only in closer to us than the stars, there's nothing down there. There's nothing beneath it. It's just plain weird. It's because the only time we've ever seen spaceship has been inside the frame, two-dimensional box, right? But when you have a 3D viewer and you've got this spaceship in space, you can kind of look down and you realize it's infinite that way. It's infinite this way. We always think it's infinite that way, right? But it's just astonishing. Anyway, so there's that. Area 51 with a $10 super chat says, I want Elon Musk to take a moon landing denier to the moon. They step out onto the surface and someone tells the denier, okay, take your helmet off. Yeah, that'd be fun. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to be back on the moon fairly quickly. And that is going to raise the question, how many moon landing deniers would be converted by seeing SpaceX on the moon in 2024, 2025? How many of them do you think would be converted? I'll bet you the number is relatively small. I think most of them would probably say, oh, well, yeah, we can do it now because we got computers and stuff. We couldn't do it in the 60s. You know what? You were saying before that things like, you couldn't survive a trip through the Van Allen belt and all these other things that you were talking about. They just did it, and you saw them do it. So, there you go. But I guarantee you a lot of people would deny it. Now, what's interesting is apparently on their closest approach, the Artemis or the Orion capsule was about 80 miles above the surface of the moon and happened to fly fairly close over one or two of the Apollo sites. But it was dark. They were not on the dark side of the moon because there is no dark side of the moon, but they were on the side of the moon that didn't have any light on it, so it was dark. And by the way, it couldn't be the far side because there's lunar modules on it. But if I understand it correctly, as this thing comes out of its big orbit, it's going to make another pass, I think, in early December, and then it's apparently going to go over the landing sites, and I'm hoping that they can possibly get some even better pictures. Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has gotten pretty amazing, but nevertheless, it's still... I don't know why I'm getting to this moon landing thing again. The simplest answer to the moon landing problem really is, if I shine a laser up to the moon, it comes back to me from here, and 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 from here. That's where the laser light comes back from. And I saw the guys put those reflectors on the ground. How did they get there? There's no convincing some people. So you get the idea. All right, so back to the super chat here. Blank Frankie for a $10 super chat says, yeah, Bill. Kaktela, I'm going to assume that that's either Klingon or Russian, and a hearty dobry dien to you and your good lady wife. Thank you very much, Blank Frankie. I'm guessing it's Russian. Sounds like Klingon, not an accident, by the way. I guess they wrote the Klingon language for Star Trek The Motion Picture. That's the first time you heard Klingons speaking Klingon. That's the first time you saw the Klingons, too. I remember being in the theater. It wasn't a great movie, but I remember the first time you see these Klingon battlecruisers, what it opens up with. You think, oh, the Klingons, awesome. And then you see them for the first time, and instead of just wearing, like, swarthy makeup, it's called Texas dirt, at least when I was in the theater. This Texas dirt is just this kind of body makeup that you put on, and it just makes you really, really dark. And then you see the brow ridge and the spiky teeth and everything. Oh, these Klingons are awesome. But Klingon is now one of the most spoken languages in the world because there's a fairly high percentage of nerds out there. I've never learned Klingon. But Russian is a strange language. My Russian has not come along at all, even though I've been with my wife for 6 years now. And the reason is because I thought at first, I gave up a long time ago. I thought that I would just start learning Russian words, but when I would try to speak them, she would continuously correct me on my pronunciation to the point where we would get to the point where I can't make that sound, honey. I can't do this. I just can't. I can't do it. And after enough of those, I just kind of gave up. What I was hoping for is, do you understand what I'm saying even though I'm pronouncing it wrong? Yes. Well, then let's start with that. But unfortunately, it just wasn't in the cards that way. Maybe that'll change. But yeah, let's leave the pronunciation till later. Because Russian speakers have some problems with English words. They have a real problem with H's. I just love it so much. I never correct my wife about it because I just love the sound of it. She wants to go to Universal Studios and ride on the Gary Potter ride, and she wants to go to Kauai, and she wants to go out and get a Gamburger, and I just love it. I just think it's so charming. All right, let's see. So, I think that's basically it for the don't be an idiot about stuff. It's got to be very practical. It's got to be very informal, but it's also got to be outside the box, outside the box. Because if you don't understand what will happen to air when it moves fast, then you never answer the main question that people want answered, and is that how does the airplane fly? Well, the airplane flies because air pressure is lower over the top of the wing than it is over the bottom wing. Okay. It's still nothing. Turns out it's not. Okay, now, we're just a couple people making comments about Russia. My wife and I had gone out and had a drink or two at a lovely establishment here in Los Angeles, and there were some other, there are a lot of Russians in Los Angeles, and I said, honey, you know what? Russian to me sounds like the sound of a drunk man falling downstairs. That's what Russian sounds like to me. And she just laughed and laughed and laughed. The guys in the booth opposite me came over and pounded the snot out of me, but nevertheless, it was worth the beating I took. Okay, there's one other thing I just kind of want to talk about. I don't know, before we get to questions, we will get to questions, and that is out in the pop culture world, the new Disney movie. It's so forgettable. Is it Strange World or Strange Planet? I don't know, and I don't care. Absolutely tanked. It made $12-13 million, something like that. And thank you, Andrew. And this is the one with with gay cartoon characters and all the rest. So Bob Chapek got fired. He's been replaced by Bob Iger, who was there before him, and then. So Disney's doubling down on the woke, and they'll triple down on the woke, and they'll just keep getting woker and woker. And unfortunately, Disney owns everything. They own Star Wars. I think they own Star Trek, and they've killed all. They own Marvel, and they've killed all of that. And it's not coming back. It's the damage is too great. You could conceivably survive The Last Jedi, but you can't survive Rise of Skywalker, and you can't Strange World. Yeah, you can't survive the damage that's been done to those franchises. So part of this is political, but I'm going to concentrate kind of on the showbiz side because you don't want to cross the streams. So they're at the point now where a number of institutions are coming out and saying they're no longer going to say ladies and gentlemen, because that excludes non-binary people. And they're making a solid effort to refer to normal people as cisgendered or heteronormative. In other words, they're trying to define themselves. They're doing exactly what Lenin did, by the way. Lenin lost a vote. He won most of the votes at one of these congresses, but he lost a vote. And he said, well, generally we're the minority. We're the Bolsheviks. Bolshoi, the Bolshoi theater. The Bolshoi is big. So Lenin declared himself to be the majority, when in point of fact, the actual Bolsheviks were a tiny part of what were the Mensheviks, which were the minority. But the Mensheviks went for it. Those idiots just plain let it go. So one little group of guys just comes out and say, we're the majority party, and this enormous other group of guys that had a lot more power, a lot more influence, agreed to say, okay, we'll be the minority party. That's just language. So they're trying to define away normality, and they're trying to with the whole thing with toxic masculinity and the whole thing about we can't have any male heroes anymore. James Bond is going to be, there's talk about Indiana Jones getting killed in this fifth movie, which I have no interest in seeing whatsoever. There's talk that it's going to be replaced by a woman. In fact, there's enough talk about that it looked like they may have reshot it. The director came out and said, absolutely not, but there are conflicting reports. A number of people have said with a modern movie, they just shoot 5 different endings and they do an audience test. That's the confidence that they have in themselves now, right? I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to write the book 5 different ways. I'm going to give it out to a bunch of different people, and whichever version they like best, that's the one I'm going to release. That's not writing, that's just marketing. So all across the room here, we're seeing not just an attempt to demonize and minimize and essentially cancel the whole idea of men in specifically, but normality in general. It's going to try to be defined away. So you're no longer, this is their plan anyway, you're no longer a male or a man. You are a cisgendered heterosexual, a cisgendered male. You're not a man, you're cisgendered male, which means that you're a male who likes the opposite sex. So they keep trying to do this, trying to define normal out of the picture, because if they can define the majority as just being another fraction, then what they basically do is they remove the barrier between how small they are as a group versus how large the group is that they're trying to impose their will upon. They're declaring themselves to be, if not the majority, then we'll all be equal together. You'll be cisgendered and I'll be transgendered. I'm never going to utter that word seriously. If anybody asks me about that, I'm just going to say I'm just not going to play that game. I don't know what you're talking about. But my wife saw a show. We're going to go see it again tomorrow night. Came back with a playbook. She went out with some friends of hers, and she brought back one of the playbook programs. And as you're reading through all of the people involved with the show, about half of them said, David Carlton, parentheses, he, him. No, she, her. All of them listing their pronouns up there. And it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. It's just making people more and more and more angry. And I am still shocked at the results of this last election, so I guess the beatings will have to continue. But nevertheless, it is a full court press to define themselves into normalcy, define us out of normalcy, and essentially make the case that these two things are more or less equal. Now, just so we're clear, because obviously George Soros is paying people to listen to every word I say. When I say they're not normal, they're not normal. But that doesn't mean that they don't have rights that everybody else does. Of course they do. They have the same right to be left alone. They have the same, as I do. I have a right to be left alone. They have the same rights. They have the same value as people. They're not saying they're lesser people, but I am saying that what they're doing politically is really fraudulent, and everybody knows it. And it's all in the language. And if we buy into this, and the big corporations are, London Underground doesn't say ladies and gentlemen anymore. It just says passengers. Okay, so if we allow this to happen, then it's pretty much done. They want language to have no meaning. You see, all of these structures that Western civilization has provided, if you want to get rid of Western civilization, then you have to get rid of the definitions that made Western civilization possible. Marisha says if their views were normal, then the human race would have gone extinct 100,000 years ago. Evolution specifically selected against them for a reason. Yes, now, here's an interesting thought that is not mine. It's from a friend of mine. And I'm not going to mention his name because he hasn't cleared me to mention it about this. But it's a very, very, very interesting point. And this is the point. This is the first time that I'm aware of that a society has had not only homosexuality be open, but celebrated. I personally think that's great. I'm all about individuality, the ability to live your own life. I have no problem with that at all, none. But homosexuals cannot reproduce. The only way that the homosexuals that are here today are here is because they had parents that were, if not heterosexual, then at least acting heterosexual. The point is, prior to very recently, you could be gay in a society and you would have to be married because you simply couldn't be gay. The vast majority of homosexuals in the 50s or the 40s, let's say, were married to members of the opposite sex because they simply could. It just wasn't acceptable. It just wasn't possible. So since homosexual, if it turns out that it's genetic, which is what they claim, then how is it that it's passed on? Well, it's been passed on because homosexuals had to conform to societies that didn't tolerate homosexuality. That meant that if it is genetic, then at least that gene is getting passed down. But if it turns out that it's not, if it is genetic, and there's no longer any taboo against homosexuality, if it is a gene, then the gene is essentially going to become extinct because there's no way to propagate it in any large numbers. So it's possible, if it is what they claim it is, if it's a genetic, hardwired trait, then by allowing homosexuality to be open and destigmatized, you are taking away that pressure that forced homosexuals to have at least some heterosexual relationships to pass the gene on. That's basically it. Dave Big Booty gets it in a sentence that took me 5 or 20 years to me. If you let gays marry, it's a genetic dead end. Jim H. says it's not genetic. People walk away from the lifestyle all the time. I don't know about that. Maybe. I'll tell you one thing. You couldn't talk me into being homosexual. And I don't think you could train me into it either. But you never know. Marisha says, how do you feel about Dave Rubin having kids? I've heard conservatives say disgusting, horrible things about him when he's trying to do everything right. All right. I'm not parsing this so I don't get in trouble because I don't really care. I'm parsing this because it's a complicated moral question for me. First of all, I think that Dave Rubin is a great parent, and I have no doubt whatsoever that they have created a very loving environment for that child, and especially if you compare that to the foster system, or in the old days to orphanages, a child that gets adopted by Dave Rubin and his partner is a lucky kid. However, it seems to me pretty clear that individual humans are at their best when they are under the influence of male and female forces growing up, because there are completely different energies. I hate using that word, characteristics, traits. There is a biological difference between men and women, not just in the sense of conception, but men tend to be less emotional, which means they're not so soft touch when it comes to discipline. They tend to be out of the house more. So when dad comes home, it's a big deal. All of these dynamics are there. And for a healthy boy or a healthy girl, you really, in an ideal situation, you want both the boy and the girl to have a male and female influence upon them to balance them out. And so I don't demonize him for that. I don't know what the fate of that child would have been otherwise. I don't think it's optimal, but it's certainly not the worst case. When you think about how many dysfunctional families out there, heterosexual families. If you think about the families where dad's, cooking meth in the garage and mom's, in jail for, stealing from Walmart. I hate to be so cliche about it, but there are thousands, millions of people like that. if you consider what those families are doing to the kids, then the child that Reuben has adopted is a lucky kid. I just don't think it's optimal. So I'm certainly not going to condemn the guy for it. I don't think that kid's future is ruined. I certainly don't think the kid is automatically going to become gay. And this really is the issue. Tiki Rocket says, this is a bad argument, Bill. What's bad about it? I'm not making an argument. Tiki Rocket says it's not a family, never will be. Well, it's certainly not a traditional normal family, Tiki Rocket, but it is a family. If you say that a woman and a man have 10 kids, and the man is killed in war, and then the mother has to raise the kids, that's still a family. Even if the father's not there, it's still a family. Dave did not adopt. What did they do? Oh, surrogate. Okay, so there you go. It is possible to have two conflicting conflict. In fact, it's not only possible; it's essential to be able to hold conflicting ideas at the same time and not lose your moral base, right? If, in fact, as people are saying, it's a surrogate, then that child wouldn't be here without at least Dave's DNA. That child would never have been created. And surrogacy is slavery. Dave bought a woman and a baby. Okay. Well, here's where I disagree with you on this, Tiki Rocket. If surrogacy is slavery if you're forced to do it. If you volitionally do it, then it's not slavery. It's a decision. If you are saying that women are impregnated against their will and must carry babies to term, or else, then that's slavery. But this isn't. And there's just no question about that in my mind. So I'm just... I think in a world where we have, the leading cause of death in this country by far, double the next highest cause of death in this country is abortion. I think that is a win. Did I just make the pro-choice argument? No, I made the anti-choice argument. My entire point is that we're living in a world where millions of lives are exterminated every year, and Dave Rubin is not one of those guys or one of those girls. So there you go. Oh, hey, here it is. Eric Otts again. Hey, hi from Brisbane. Have some dollars. Thank you very much for that super chat there. Every child needs a mom and a dad. Period. I agree, but we live in the real world. Take Dave and take not only Dave and his partner out of it. Take homosexuality out of it completely. Just take it out, right? Just pretend it doesn't exist. Yes, every child does better with a dad and a mom. I've been saying this the entire time. I'm not backing up on anything. I'm not contradicting myself. It's the optimal situation. But to say that everybody must to say that it's good and necessary doesn't mean that it happens. How many single moms are there out there, right? Yes, it's not optimal, but it's there, yeah, right? It's there. And you can't wish it away, and you can't wish it away on a theoretical basis. It's there. Now, what you can do is you can go. What I try to do is you can try to get to a place where you're actually convincing people of a moral structure and so on. But it's there. So Tiki Rocket says, see, this is the issue. You just went from complaining about normalcy being defined away and start saying, well, there's no such thing as a family. I didn't say there's no such thing as a family. I didn't say that at all. I said the opposite of that. This may be a definitional thing, but I'd rather have yeah, I'd rather have two gay parents who love me than have a father who was beating mom up every night and a mom who was drinking heavily and kept me in a garage. It's not you're not you're not promoting it and you're not condoning it. You are essentially accepting it, but that doesn't mean that you approve of it. It doesn't mean that you're promoting it. This is the entire point, right? This is the entire issue. My feeling about conservatism is that it is the philosophy that deals with reality. It's the philosophy that Tiki Rocket says there's no definition of a family. Well, my definition of a family is adults and children living together in the same house. If you're saying that if you're not married, that's not a family, would that fit your definition, Tiki Rocket? I'm not trying to single you out. This is a conversation between adults. This is how we learn things. This is how we change our mind. So if you're saying that two gay men and a child is not a family, what about a single mom? But more importantly, what about a man and woman living together, not married? Is that a family? Yes or no? So anyway, back to my point about conservatism. We have to deal with reality. The entire problem with progressivism is it wishes for something, and then the policies come out as if wishing would make it happen, but it's just not true. It doesn't work that way. That's where I'm trying to get to with this thing. It's there. I didn't put it there. And I would prefer to have every child in a family with two loving parents. That is not only optimal for me, that's why I do what I do. That's where I'm trying to go, right? That's where I'm trying to go. Okay, so Marisha says, two pedos living with a child, that's not a family. Well, there is an argumentative fallacy called reductio ad absurdum, and you can certainly paint a picture of an absurd argument, and there's one. Okay, well, political animal says it's not a pop culture topic. Fair enough. I'll deal with it on the Stratosphere Lounge if it comes up. But with that said, you have to play the hand that you're dealt. Reality deals all of us a hand and deals society a hand. And you don't get to say, I wish I had a straight flush. You have to play the cards. You have to understand where you are to start from, and then you play the cards. And you try to improve your hand. But to wish for a hand and to say that I'm not going to play because I didn't get the perfect hand, well, there you go, That's essentially it. All right, so let's have a look here. Okay, here we go, Stratopop questions. Let's just see how many we get, because I'm going to try and get them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10. And they're long ones, but we'll get through them. All right. Ian Nolan, Bill, serious question ahead. Good. Your personal friendship with the Rutans aside, trying to be as objective as possible, who was the most innovative, groundbreaking aircraft designer in history? Rutan, Kelly, the Wright brothers, Boeing, Gurevich, as in Mikoyan Gurevich. All right, it's gonna be down to two. I'm gonna take the Wright brothers out of this because the innovations in the Wright Flyer were not. It's almost hard to call them innovations when the entire science hadn't been there. So, for instance, the Wright brothers flyer used wing warping, and wing warping is just not a thing anymore. So that was something that they've used that didn't work. So while I have enormous respect for the Wrights, I don't think they're in contention. And as far as things like somebody says Messerschmitt and all the rest of it, look, Messerschmitt and guys like that built the Me-109 was the first real modern fighter in terms of World War II, in terms of metal monoplane. And they continued to design things, and they designed a bunch of other single-engine, multi-engine propeller airplanes, and then they put a jet engine on what is essentially a World War II fighter. So that's innovative. And Joe John says Sikorsky and Bell and all of that stuff. But that's not game-changing innovation. That is incrementalism. Same thing for Howard Hughes. Somebody said it should be Hughes. Hughes built a two-engine Hughes Racer. It wasn't the first twin-engine airplane, and it wasn't the last. It was a beautiful airplane. It was very, very fast. But in terms of out-of-the-box innovation, I just don't think that counts. Likewise, the Hercules, because I'm not going to call it what everybody else calls it, because it's a magnificent effort. But the Hercules was just a larger seaplane than the previous seaplanes. So I think it comes down to Burt Rutan and Kelly Johnson. And I'm going to go with Burt Rutan on this one, not just because he's my friend. I'm gonna make the case here. So Kelly Johnson designed the A-12, which became morphed into the SR-71. He designed and built the U-2. I think he was responsible for the F-104. He might have been responsible for the P-38. I'm not sure about that. Lockheed Skunk Works has done some absolutely amazing stuff, and they've done some very high-performance stuff. But the reason I'm going to give it to Burt is because what Skunk Works did was Skunk Works took essentially existing, I don't even want to say designs, existing templates, maybe, and expanded on those. For example, the SR-71, I prefer to talk about the A-12 personally, is an extremely refined jet engine fighter. It does incrementally better than, for example, the B-70 Valkyrie, right? B-70 was a Mach 3 bomber. So you're at the bleeding edge of the envelope, but you're not on the other side of the envelope. And furthermore, the amount of resources and money that was behind Skunk Works and Lockheed and all the rest of it wasn't that Kelly Johnson basically did all that on his own. Burt, on the other hand, has done two things, not one thing. He's done two things that I thought were, and most people thought were, impossible. There was nothing impossible about the SR-71. It was difficult. It was extremely difficult. And I'm not arguing against Kelly Johnson. Kelly Johnson is absolutely astonishing, and I have nothing but the highest respect for him. But basically, he did not redefine the airplane. So here's why I make the case for Burt. Voyager doesn't look like any other airplane that's ever been built, because any other airplane design conventional airplane design couldn't accomplish the mission. The genius of Voyager, in my opinion, the single genius of Voyager is how he solved the problem. Okay? And your problem is this. You need a lot of fuel. Essentially, the Voyager's a flying fuel tank. Okay? We got that. In order to have enough horsepower to get that flying fuel up and in cruise and lift all of that fuel when the thing is lifting off, it's at its absolute heaviest. In order to have enough horsepower to get that thing off the runway, you have to have a beefy engine or a couple of them. But the problem with the beefy engine is that its fuel consumption is so high. And so, which do you build for? Do you build an airplane with a really efficient cruise engine that can go around the world on the fuel carried on the thing but can't take off because there's not enough power? Or do you build one that can take off but can't go around the world? It's an insoluble problem until Bert solved it. And what he did was he made it a part-time twin. He put two engines on this thing and relatively small piston engines. And on takeoff and climb, they're both functioning, but the second you get into cruise, you don't need that horsepower needed for climb. Second you get into cruise, you can shut one of those engines down, and they're not side by side, so you don't have to deal with this thrust differential. You can just shut half of your power down, shut half of your horsepower down. You're still carrying the weight, and you're carrying a little drag from the feathered prop, but essentially you've gotten your cake and eat it too. You've got enough horsepower to take off, and then once you're at cruise, you basically cut the fuel consumption in half. That is absolutely, unbelievably brilliant in my mind. That is the absolute outside of the box thinking. And in order to do that, you have to design an airplane that looks like Voyager, which looks unlike anything that has ever flown before. Is completely, absolutely, totally different. And he sat down and sketched it out with Dick at a restaurant. I've been at that restaurant up in Mojave. Dick said, "Want to fly around the world?" And Bert's there, and they're having dinner. And yes, if you had to carry enough fuel, you still got the napkin that he drew it on, and it's essentially the exact same design. So there's that. There's another thing that Bert did that I think is unmatched. He had another problem that had to be solved and was insoluble. So we've already talked about the one impossible dilemma that he engineered his way around, visualized his way around, not engineered, visualized his way around. The second was this. He wanted to get a suborbital flight. And he didn't have a ton of money, but even if he had a ton of money, it wouldn't have changed anything. So you've got the example of the X-15, right? X-15, titanium skin, rocket-powered, carried up to altitude by a B-52. It's nothing but sheer, raw thrust. And it's made out of extremely exotic materials, the nose cone and so on. It just takes an awful lot of heat and so on. It's an extremely complex system. But Bert's problem, as I said, in terms of flying around the world is, do you have enough horsepower to get the thing off the ground, or do you have a low enough fuel consumption rate to get around the planet? Bert's got the same problem when he did the Spaceship One project. He needs something that will go up streamlined because he's only got so much power, he's only got so much altitude from the drop, so he needs a streamlined craft to go up. But if he comes down streamlined like the X-15, he's going to reach airspeeds that are so high that now he has to do all of this exotic material stuff. Now he has to start building it out of titanium. Now he has to start putting ceramic tiles on the nose. He has to do all of this stuff, right? So which one do you pick? If you have a smooth dart going up, on the way down, it becomes a lawn dart and gets so hot you have to build it like the X-15. Or you build something that is so draggy that it doesn't come down that fast, but obviously if it's that draggy, you can't get it up there. So which one do you want? Well, Bert decided to have both. He built a streamlined aircraft that goes all the way up like a bullet, just absolutely streamlined, goes right up to apogee. And once it gets clear of the burn and out of the atmosphere, then Bert Rutan didn't add air brakes and he didn't add, flaps or anything like that. He needed all the drag he could get, right? all of it. He needed this thing to be as draggy as possible because the drag was what would keep the temperatures within limits. An X-15 or a space shuttle is streamlined enough to go up, and when it comes down, it's so streamlined that it will gain a lot of speed because it's not draggy. But what Bert's brilliant idea was, if I can keep this thing draggy enough, if there's enough drag on this vehicle as it comes back into the atmosphere, it will never be going so fast that it will need special heat protection. We probably keep the temperature down to maybe 200, 250, 300 degrees. There's lots of materials that will function at that temperature. So he didn't just add flaps. He broke the airplane in half. He just broke it in half. All the tail feathers are in a line on the way up, and then it's before apogee, but on the way up. Once it's out of the atmosphere and the engine is off, then the tail does a 90-degree bank so that when the thing starts to come down, the tail feathers keep, using the relative wind that we talked about earlier, keep the entire front is a flat plane. He's flat plane drag. He's got every single square inch of the front 2/3 of that vehicle is nothing but drag. And the ability to break an airplane in half in flight in order to solve those problems is, to me, the most remarkable act of outside of the box thinking I've ever heard of. So that's number one, and Voyager's number two in terms of just plain aeronautical design genius. Kelly Johnson was certainly a genius, but there was nothing groundbreaking about what he did in terms of theoreticals. He had to build a plane that went faster than anything else. But again, like I said, we had the B-70. We had aircraft that were routinely doing Mach 2, so we needed one that did Mach 3. And he got these very expensive, very big engines, and off he went. It's an astonishing machine. It's an amazing machine. But it is essentially put bigger engines on something, get it out of titanium because it's going to get hot, and then just streak it through the sky. I just chucked those bottle caps away. Here, Eric Gotts with a $20 thing. Yeah, that's not a knife. This is a knife from, that was a great movie, Crocodile Dundee. Okay. Bart's Treasure says he didn't break the airplane, he just extremely bent it. Yeah, well, he didn't bend exactly. We're splitting hairs, and it's all kind of semantics, and I know it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but nevertheless, he broke it in half. And he had an airplane that went up one way and came down another way. It's just genius. So Kelly Johnson had to solve a lot of engineering problems. The U-2 was a groundbreaking aircraft, but the U-2 was essentially a glider. Once you calculate the wing area, the reason the U-2's got such long wings is that long wings are more efficient. They're very draggy, but in terms of efficiency, in terms of creating the greatest lift per area, you want long aspect ratio wings, which is why glider wings are so long. And I got started in gliders. Some of these carbon fiber gliders have just these incredible wingspans. And when these guys are even in practically in level flight, the wings are bent. When the guy pulls a couple G's on these new gliders, the thing does just almost a complete U. It's unbelievable. So again, he's got engineering challenges. Bert had engineering challenges, but he couldn't address the engineering challenges until he had solved the theoretical vision breakthrough. And that is why he's the greatest aircraft designer that ever lived or is likely to live. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, moving on. Henry Lumley. I saw a couple of weeks ago that Amazon's Project Kuiper, their copy of Starlink, good luck with that, will have to use the SpaceX Starships to get their constellations of satellite into orbit. Why? Well, for regulatory approval, Amazon has to get at least 50% of the total satellites into orbit before the deadline in 2026. But because of the delays on Blue Origin's New Glenn, ESA's Ariane 6 and United Launch Alliance Vulcan Centaur delayed because Amazon will miss that deadline and receive a huge fine if they do not also fly on the Starship. Funny thing is that the Vulcan Centaur is delayed because Blue Origin is too slow making their BE-4 engines. Absolutely correct. So Jeff has no one to blame but himself. His delays are going to mean that he has to go hat in hand and ask Musk to launch his satellites, but he's still fighting to delay Starship. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. I'll finish the end of that sentence because that is an important point. Should these delay lawfare tactics that Jeff has engaged in be met with countersuits or even congressional action as punishment for the incredible costs and delays Jeff has created for everyone involved? Question mark. Also, a note from last week, the 200 Raptors that SpaceX have built are Raptor Gen 2s. Those have only been in production for maybe 18 months, and they are already building them at one a day. 200 Raptor 2s is already enough for 6 super heavy boosters, which are reusable, by the way. Okay, so you've made an interesting point here, and I was not aware of this. When I heard that Bezos had sued SpaceX because they didn't get the lunar landing mission, I thought, okay, that's just plain petty. Petty. But now you've made the case for why it's going to cost him money. So maybe slowing down SpaceX over the lunar lander wasn't just out of sheer pettiness. Maybe it was so that he didn't have to deal with these fines or whatever the case may be. But I agree with Roy Hamill here, and that is F Amazon. And just Jeff Bezos especially, F him. He's just he's not a good guy. And he started Blue Origin well before SpaceX, and he was the richest man in the world for virtually the entire duration. And he hasn't done anything with it. And neither has Branson and Starship. They just haven't done anything. They don't take it seriously. It's not a job for them, and it's certainly not an obsession. It's a hobby. It's a toy, right? Both of them are so, both Branson and Bezos are so temperamentally unsuited to being successful at something that is this cutting edge. This is really the heart of the matter. This is why Blue Origin has failed and why Virgin Galactic has failed. They failed because both of those CEOs, Bezos and Branson, are incapable of facing repeated failure. I think that's the only explanation for it. I think their attitude towards both of these things were, take as long as you want to, but we can't have one of them blow up because it just would look too bad. Richard Branson is not a nice guy, and I don't think Jeff Bezos is either. I don't know whether Elon Musk is a nice guy, but the things I see from Elon Musk, I certainly seem to like, including things like telling everybody at Twitter, hey, you're either going to work hard is going to be the minimum acceptable deal, extra hours hard work, and if you're not interested, get out of here. So, to your larger point, yes, everybody thought that Blue Origin, given the amount of money and the amount of time that they had to work with, would be so far up on the game that Blue Origin would be able to launch their own satellites and made a commitment based on that. And the Vulcan Centaur was depending on the engines that Bezos was going to design for New Glenn, which was going to be the successor to New Shepard as an orbital vehicle. I don't know that I don't believe I've even seen a prototype, a mock-up of New Glenn. I don't know if there's an extant mock-up of one, but I do know that there are not only an unlimited number of, a seemingly unlimited number of Falcon boosters, but Musk started on his replacement for the Falcon Heavy before the Falcon Heavy even flew. That's vision, right? I mean, he right now, take Starship out of it completely. Right now, Elon Musk owns space. He owns it. If you want to get something into space reliably and inexpensively, SpaceX is the way to go. And he could have just stopped there and cornered the launch market. But he doesn't think that way. He's got a goal. He's got an obsession. And that's what you need. You need an obsession. And he is going to Mars. And when I found out, he said you need 5,000, I think it was 5,000 Starship Heavy flights in order to get a base on Mars and make it self-sustaining. When I heard that, I thought, wow. And I heard that right at the same time when Musk was talking about a 1 hour turnaround is their goal. Not a day, which would be amazing. The shuttle was months and months to turn it around. Not just turn around one a day, one an hour. So now he's building something that catches the booster, puts it down, cranks it full of fuel, swings over here, picks up another upper stage, puts it on, up she goes. You got just enough time for lunch and the bathroom and then get back on board because you're going. Once you get to that level of vision, then everything changes. And he is a remarkable guy. In the comments section on YouTube, let's see, what's it? Political Animal 87 said, by the way, Bill, the Twitter amnesty today restored something like 60,000 accounts. Okay. Starlaw says that Elon is a maverick and a cowboy. He's both of those things, but he's also something else. He's an extremely focused guy. And it may seem strange to say that, but in my opinion, all of his companies are just ways of making money that all go towards his obsession, and his obsession is Mars. So to get to Mars, definitely you need the rocket company, right? You need SpaceX. But if you're going to move on Mars, and there's no way to live on Mars if you can't move around on Mars, that requires an electric vehicle. So why don't we get all of our testing done on electric vehicles and sell them here on Earth for a profit? You're going to need a communications constellation around Mars. Why don't we try that out here? And essentially, we'll own virtually every internet service provider account in the world in a short period of time. Significant portion of them anyway. So that's a revenue stream for something he's going to need. And then the Boring Company, right? He's talking about building hyperspeed, tunnels with trains in them. And because there's a vacuum in front of it, refer to the earlier part of the show, they can move very, very fast. Not quite as fast as airplanes, but certainly faster than supertrains, 400 or 500 miles an hour. That's cool. But that technology is needed on Mars too, because you're going to have to build most of your stuff underground, at least for the beginning anyway. So to me, the single great attribute that Musk has is his vision, but he's also not so target locked that he can't see that we can do all of these things before we need them, and we can make them self-sustaining companies and make a profit on them, which will help us pay to go to Mars. Political Animal says Musk is already talking about a Tesla cell phone. We'll see how it goes. His batteries are a big improvement. He's talking about an energy system that I don't understand. I need to look into this. But he's just an astonishing guy. You know, Jeff Bezos figured out how to do one thing right. And by the way, I happen to know the person that made that possible. I know the guy who designed the website. There's no Amazon without that functionality. That's the entire business model, is can you make things delivered in a short period of time, a day or two, when somebody clicks a button? And that is a software issue. It's also a hardware issue, but mostly it's a software issue. He didn't write that program, and he was cooked if he didn't have it. So he had a good business model, and he deserves the credit for that. And Amazon is Amazon, and good and bad, it's still an astonishing achievement. Branson, on the other hand, is a guy who's always seemed to me to be much more of a promoter. He's one of those guys that are more hat than cattle, I think. I think when Burt was flying Spaceship One and getting all the press and attention, I think that Branson thought, hey, this is kind of a fun toy. Doesn't sound like it's going to be too much money. We can get our Virgin brand out there, a Virgin Galactic, Virgin America. We had, Virgin Records, Virgin Atlantic. You had all of these Virgin products, right? And by the way, I flew Virgin America every chance I could for 3 years, and that was without doubt the best airline I've ever been on. Not just the best, but the most fun. It was just wicked cool. I just loved it. And then they sell Virgin Atlantic off to, was it Alaska? I think it was Alaska. And now, he's just essentially this. He's a promoter. He's not a visionary. He's a promoter. And Musk isn't. That's actually not true. That's another part of Musk's genius, is that he's not only an engineer, and I mean an actual engineer. He's not like a guy who supervises it. He's an engineer. But he's not only an engineer, not only a visionary, he's also a showman. And that is a virtually inconceivable combination. And I've mentioned it before, but it bears mentioning again. Hey, first time chat from Plastic Gangsta. Some of the very first trains were atmospheric, which uses a vacuum for actual propulsion. Yes. Alfred Beach did a subway system in New York City. Did a tiny little test thing, and it was going to be propelled by pneumatic pressure. So he's an interesting guy too, Alfred Beach. So Musk is not just a engineer and a visionary, he's also a showman. Putting the Tesla convertible as the payload for Falcon Heavy is the most brilliant act of advertising I've ever seen. And he's not actually advertising in the way that most people think about it. It's not like he had a sign up there for, like he's selling, detergent. But what he did, he didn't just cross the brands, right? He didn't just cross promote Tesla and SpaceX. He did much more than that. When he put a red convertible, not just in orbit around the Earth, it's in orbit around the sun. It's out there. You can find out where it is at any given time. It's out there, and it will continue to be out there. But when that fairing came off, and you start hearing David Bowie, not Stars and Stripes Forever, and not John Williams, David Bowie, and then you find out that he's got the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on his Don't Panic on his navigation screen. That is a nerdgasm. I mean, it's just impossibly cool. And it's inconceivable that a corporation could come up with it. It's inconceivable that any corporation would come up with it. Can you imagine Lockheed or Boeing doing that? Never. Not a chance. It would get shot down in a committee by somebody. Somebody somewhere would talk about how it's going to offend somebody or it's going to do this or going to do that. Let's just send up a concrete block or whatever. Musk doesn't care. And not only doesn't he care, he knows he's right. He knows he's got it, and he knows he's going to do it. He is really, really, really something else. And I had a lot of doubts about the Twitter thing. But he reinstated Donald Trump. He fired most of those people. I have some concerns about some of the people he kept, but he let 60,000 banned accounts back. It's free speech now on Twitter. People often say, well, we have to defend free speech, because it's priceless. It's not priceless. We know what it costs. It costs $43 billion. That's what free speech costs in this country to get it back. It's $43 billion. That's the price. And it took a visionary to get there. And when I hear his justification for it, I have no doubt there's other things at work and financial things at work, and he's a very, very shrewd businessman. But the reason he gave, I personally believe, is the actual reason he did it. He basically saying, look, you cannot have a dynamic, innovative, successful, growing, adventurous society without the conflict of ideas. It's not just that I'm doing this because of the Founding Fathers and the Constitution and all the rest of it. It's like, going forward, we cannot succeed if we don't do the one thing that we have always done better than everybody else, and that is argue and compromise. That's the American genius, is the marketplace of ideas, and freedom of speech is not only a sacred right, it is the engine that powers all of it. It powers the economy, it powers the military, it powers the creativity, it powers everything. And when you start to make all these laws and put more laws on top of things, and now Musk can't fly. He can't fly. He didn't fly for a year and a half. Why? Because he was out of components? No. Was it because he had technical problems? No. Politically, he was not allowed to fly because people were jealous and people thought that they wanted a piece of it. He's very much like John Galt in this regard. You know, he really is. He's like, I'm going to go out there and do this, or not just Galt. Let's see if I should know this. It's on the tip of my tongue. Who made the blue steel? Yeah, the blue steel rails. It's just right there. Reardon, thank you. Yeah, he's created. So in the Ayn Rand novel, you've got this guy Reardon. He's developed a super kind of steel, extremely durable, inexpensive, tough, all the rest of it, and he basically wants to set up an entire railroad network using Reardon steel, which will then be so much more efficient to put everybody else out of business. And it would, and it was. And then the government got a hold of it, and then the bureaucrats got a hold of it, and then everything else got a hold of it, and they just plain clawed him down. First time chat from Medium K2, which has been listening, 100% agree. Well said, thank you. I think it was for me. So he gets it, and it's like you really need, when you consider the magnitude of the forces that are working against freedom, the magnitude, not just the money, but certainly the money, but the magnitude and the inertia that this left-wing New World Order Great Reset has. When you have to face that, the only chance you've got is somebody with enough power behind their vision to actually make it work. And he's the richest man in the world. So he can make things happen. There's not free speech in this country? Nope. Okay, why? Because all the social media things are all controlled by left-wingers. Well, if they're all controlled by left-wingers, we're not going to have any discussion about anything. They're going to do what they do. They're going to write more regulations. We're not going to have any back and forth. We're going to lose all of our creativity. We're going to lose everything that makes this country work. So I guess I have to buy a social media company. I don't really want to, but I'm going to have to because I'm going to need pilots who aren't born yet. That's why he bought Twitter, in my opinion. Because he's got engineers, pilots, and other personnel that aren't born yet. And they're going to need to grow up knowing how to argue, knowing how to defend a position, and knowing how to change their mind. That's the thing about Musk. So there's a clip of him. I think I want to make sure I get this right. There's a clip of him, I think, where he's giving a tour. This was a while ago. And he's walking around, and somebody tweeted something about exhaust gases or something like that. And he said, you could just do it that way. And then Musk is in the video clip. He said, yes, well, we do that for the booster stage, but you couldn't do it to the top. You couldn't. We're going to have to make some changes to the upper stage, like that, right? Somebody presented him with an idea that he knew worked, and did he say, well, it's a better idea, but we've already got, our design and we, our production line and blah, blah, blah. No. Somebody says you can do this much more efficiently this way. Yes, of course I can. Stop the presses. That's it. And Burt Rutan did that. He did it on a smaller scale, but it was exactly the same thing with him at Scaled Composites, right? He simply got done what needed to get done because they had a very small team who believed in him and who believed in what they were doing, and they delivered. They put the first private citizen into space. They did it in 2004. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to move it on here. From Tom Scarance, I hope. Sorry if I got that wrong, Tom. You can even build, once the colonies are wildly successful, you need to release the colonies the game. Yes. Players would start on a socialist paradise of Earth where you can't fail unless you run afoul of the secret police, but you also can't do much. Once you grind it out a bit, you could choose to move outward from Earth to, say, crony capitalism on the moon. Eventually, you work your way out to a free market colony. If you go too far out, you run into anarchy, and the first pirate that comes along kills you and takes your stuff. I'm liking the way you're thinking here, Tom. It would be interesting to see what zone players would gravitate to. Being a game, maybe everyone would just go straight to anarchy and start killing. Those are griefers, and I've dealt with them before. They're the worst people in the world. For instance, when the makers of Ultima created an ecosystem with the assumption that the players would just go after the high-value animals at the top of the food chain, they found out instead that people just killed everything in sight. Yeah. Let me just get this real quick. I'll come back to this. Super chat from Frankie again. Hey, thank you, Frankie. Bill, and Preston, Natasha, and check out Russian Accelerator, a Russian language course for total beginners with a unique teaching method. It's a one-time payment of a few $100s for a lifetime access. I will check that out. And by the way, I mentioned that reason I wasn't getting Russian was because she was insisting on the pronunciation right. But the main problem with Russian is Cyrillic. When I see Russian words in Latin letters, I can speak them and I can remember them. But Cyrillic is, it's like Babylonian cuneiform. It's like I can't even get started. Whenever as I say, if somebody will take a Russian word and spell it out in Latin characters, I can approximate the pronunciation close enough so people can understand me. That's how you learn Spanish. That's how I learned a little Spanish, but Russian just stops at the Cyrillic gate. So anyway, there you go. So I want to get back to this. Tom had a really great question, I think. Let's start from the bottom up. Talks about, for instance, the makers of Ultima created an ecosystem with the assumption that players would go after the high-value animals at the top of the food chain. They found out instead that people just killed everything in sight. People killed everything in sight because there is an entirely different set of consequences in a video game than there are in real life, and this is why you have griefers. I spent a year and a half, I guess, playing Star Citizen. It's my first experience, I think, that I can think of with griefers. Basically, for those of you not familiar with the term, a griefer is somebody who goes in there and does destructive things not to achieve any purpose other than to make somebody else's life miserable. That's all they're interested in. They're interested in doing something that is so destructive and pointless. That's really it. It's absolutely pointless. So they get off on that. And the problem is that killing all the animals or griefing doesn't work in the real world. For example, when I was playing Star Citizen, the main form of griefing was you would basically sit in a spaceship above Port Olisar, let's say, and the second that somebody's ship spawned, it would appear on a pad. And then you wait till you can see the guy walking out to a ship, and just as he's walking towards the ship, you just give it everything you got, and you crash your ship into that and blow the whole thing up. And you make the guy miserable. He has to wait for the thing to, regenerate, and sometimes that can take a long time. So he's just ruining the player's game. And the reason they can do it is because it doesn't cost them anything. You don't have that in real life, because if that was real life, he would die as he was doing the griefing. And Political Animal says Bill Griefers are Democrats that play video games. Yeah, exactly. So what you learn from this, there is something to learn from this. And what you learn from this is, I was talking earlier about how atmospheric pressure means that air permeates anywhere it can go, and everything stays pretty much the same pressure, because anytime anything new opens up, enough air will go into that open space to make it equivalent with the outside space, and that's that. That's how reality works. But griefers can't exist in the real world because because griefing would be a one-time thing. They'd be a suicide bomber. And so what I'm getting at is people will misbehave to the limits of the ecosystem. People will misbehave to the limits of the ecosystem. As far as it is possible to go, that's where they'll go. And that is a valuable piece of information. It's not a pleasant piece of information, but it's a valuable piece of information. You know, it's a little similar to this idea of, you know, we're going to make something foolproof, and the response to that is, well, we'll just make better fools. You have to have a hard limit on whatever the system is. If it's a computer game, or if it's actual colonization of space or whatever, you can just assume that there will be people in that system who will do the most noble things for the most noble reasons, and you can also assume that there will be people who will do nothing. Look, some people just want to watch the world burn, period. It's just that simple. That line was absolutely brilliant. How do you explain this behavior? There is no explanation for it. People like to watch the world burn. That's it. My gosh, Sacred Order of Knightly Valor for 200 yen. Reading Horus Heresy. Thanks for your recommendation. It's amazing. Good. It's going to keep you for a while, but thank you, and thank you for the super chat. Okay, so there's that. Then the previous step is really interesting too. You start out with a game, and you have to escape from the bureaucracy, and you get to something that looks like a managed economy. If you get further out, then you get a free market. But if you go too far out, you've got anarchy and chaos. It's actually a really brilliant assessment of things, Scott. I'm sorry, Tom. And the reason it's brilliant is because what you've just described as an onion, and the layers of the onion are determined by the legal system. They're determined by how constricting the law is at that particular place. So in the core, on Earth, the law is so constricting that no one can do anything. No one can move, no one can innovate. Everything is regulated, everything is fined, anything that is not mandatory is forbidden, right? That's when the law and the government is so strong that you can't move. Then you go out into a world where you have more freedom, but you're still not free. You can buy influence, you can play the game, you can work your way up, you can make connections, but it's not a free market. That means the law is still there, strong enough to keep competitors out of the market and favor the guys that are already in there. Then you go out to the area that you want to live in, which is a free market economy, where there's enough law so that deals are enforced, so that if I sign a contract and I renege on my contract, then there'll be consequences. Because if there aren't, then everybody will be just cheating. And then beyond that, you go to a place where there's either very little law or lawlessness, and it falls apart there too. So that's actually a really interesting way of thinking about it. There's that sweet spot where there's not so much law and regulation that everything is stifled, but there's enough so that it's not anarchy. And that is where this country used to be, I think, about as close as you could get it on this planet Earth, this real planet of ours. But thinking about it in terms of concentric circles like that, that's really, really interesting. That's very, I'm going to get a lot of use out of that, Tom. Thank you. G.K. Masterson. Hey, Bill, what is the air velocity of an unladen swallow? Well, are we talking about a European swallow or an African swallow? In all seriousness, I've been thinking about TV shows with a male-female lead and wondering why some worked and others didn't. For instance, The X-Files worked, and Scully was perfectly believable for an FBI agent, and she and Mulder made a great team. It worked so well that people still go back and rewatch the show instead of binging the modern stuff. So when did we lose the ability to write and cast good female leads in action series? I know why we lost it, but being able to pinpoint the when would be a bit better and would be very useful in getting funding for our new entertainment ventures. Okay, that's a great example. So if somebody has the brackets for when that show ran, it's late 90s, virtually positive. But so just if somebody here can clue me in on what the actual years were, that's a good place to start for X-Files. Okay, so first of all, you're right. The dynamic works, and the reason the dynamic between Scully and Mulder work is because it's balanced, right? It's in a state of almost perfect balance. Mid to late 90s, that's what I thought. Thank you. That's the secret to virtually anything working. In the X-Files, if one of those characters had been dominant, then it really wouldn't have worked. Thank you, guys, for that. I said, Marisha Dark said, Bill Whittle, 1993 to 2002. I thought, hopefully I got a little more time than that. So if Mulder is too dominant, then you lose the grounding in reality. If Scully is too dominant, then you don't have the sense of wonder and that mystery. So it's perfectly balanced. The original Star Trek series is perfectly balanced between three people. That's not a two-way balance. That's a scale. You got emotion here with McCoy. You've got logic with Spock, and you've got Kirk holding the scale, and that's a stable and interesting system. And if you take any one of those three parts and you make them more powerful, you lose the essence of the show. If McCoy was right 99% of the time, Spock would look like a robot. If Spock were right 99% of the time, he would be a robot. So all of that. So late 90s, early 2000s. So what happened in there? Well, this whole thing really started with the Frankfurt School in the 20s, but essentially came to America in its current form with, Saul Alinsky and that crowd. So Hillary Clinton was a fan of Saul Alinsky's, wrote her term paper or graduation paper about him. So I think you can trace all this back to the 60s, that giant, horrible, god-awful convulsion that no one can understand, where you go from Neil Armstrong to Abby Hoffman. That thing is when it started. And over time, those students start to get jobs, and you don't usually just start off as a writer those days are gone, but network TV at the time, network TV was it, right? So if you're going to be writing for the X-Files, you're top of the pyramid in terms of writing. So in order to be a writer of that quality, and the X-Files scripts were pretty much excellent, you have to have enough life experience to be able to know what you're writing about. And that takes a couple decades. So I'm thinking that was really kind of the last generation that grew up before this great 60s convulsion. After the X-Files, the people that are doing the writing will be products of the politicized and indoctrinated education system. Rubber Ducky 69 says, "What the F is this, and how did I get here?" I don't know, Rubber Ducky, but you're certainly welcome to stay. Got a bunch of interesting people here. We're talking about when did people stop learning how to write good female characters? Because X-Files had Scully and Mulder, and they were terrific, and now you've got, Mary Sue-a-thons with, Mikey Spock and Ray and all the rest of these people. So it was really before, it's not before feminism, because feminism, in terms of meaning equality, that every human being with any kind of a heart and soul is in favor of equal treatment for people under the law and so on. But somewhere along the line, this thing went from ripe to overripe. And when that convulsion happened, everybody who matured after X-Files, in other words, people who got old enough to write network TV after 2002, 2005, they were born late enough so that they got indoctrinated. And the indoctrination has increased more and more and more. So the reason now that you can't have any good female characters is because the female characters are written by women. That's why there are no good female characters, because they're all written by women. It doesn't mean that women can't write good female characters, because D.C. Fontana, among many others, Ursula K. Le Guin, they're fantastic writers. The reason that modern females cannot write women characters is because in Hollywood, which rewards cronyism, it is so far left wing, it is so feminist that the entire idea now of a man explaining something to somebody, of a woman depending on a man, of a man being strong, those things have to go, because these people are a little confused when it comes to cause and effect. They think if you change the effect, then the cause will reverse itself, and time doesn't flow that way. So that whole idea of the self-esteem movement was a theory, and the theory was wrong. Maybe it could have been right. It wasn't. And I don't mean it could have been right, because it was never right, but you didn't know it was wrong at the time. And the theory was, hey, here's the thing. Successful people get a lot of positive feedback. So if we give positive feedback to regular people, then they're going to become extraordinary people. And that's not how it works, but that's what we did. So we didn't give first place trophies to people who came in first. We gave everybody a participant trophy, and we thought that that would raise the people who were not getting trophies before, but all it did was lower the people who were actually good at things, gave them less incentive. Let's see here. First time chat from, sorry, it's just the Pilgrim, TISKB, sorry. I hope new writers are part of the Paulo Freire pedagogy syndrome. They're indoctrinated, okay? And because they're indoctrinated, they have strict confines about what they can and cannot say. They cannot write a movie where the woman is insecure or confused or fails or anything. Just can't be done. And that's because they're so immature and insecure about their philosophy that they cannot bear it. It's not a question of the psychological need to be right all the time when confronting the man and you're going to be stunning and brave girl boss, right? That picture in their mind is so overwhelming that they don't understand that they are destroying the idea of a strong female character by adhering to what they believe a strong female character does. For example, let's take Galadriel, right? Written by either women or beta males, and therefore the women that write Galadriel, and this applies to She-Hulk and all the rest, and Rey and all that stuff, but the women that wrote the Galadriel character in Rings of Power don't know what male leadership is. They don't know what military leadership is. They don't know what drives it. They don't feel it. They don't have any exposure to it. There are women out there who do understand honor, and they're in the military mostly, but these people certainly didn't understand it. But they had an idea what it sounded like, so they parroted it, and they copied it. It's almost like a cargo cult, you know. They look at Aragorn, let's say, and they see that he's tough and he's strong, and so they write their character to be tough and strong. But what they don't get is the thing about Aragorn that made Aragorn the kind of guy you would follow was his vulnerability. That's why people stood with him outside the gates, right? He's standing outside the gates of Mordor, and he's essentially saying, we can't win this fight. I'm not going to lie to you, but we have to do it, right? We're all going to do it together, right? And then finally, when it's time to cheer people up, he's saying, look, yeah, eventually everything's going to go to hell, but not today, not here, not with you. That quality of male leadership is something that they don't understand. All they see is the external trappings of it. So they think that leadership means barking orders at people and being strong and not budging a little bit, and you do it, you get on your job and you do this, and the effing audacity, and then you get Admiral Holdo, you know, who thinks that leadership is smacking the man in the face and sending him off to his room. That's what leaders do. They have no conception of it. They don't have it. It's not there. They just don't have it, and they'll never have it because of their philosophy, because of their moral system. So when you listen to Rings of Power, the dialogue sounds like, when I say sounds like, I don't mean in content, it's almost like if you were listening to Rings of Power and you didn't speak English, and you'd seen Lord of the Rings and you didn't speak English, then listening to Rings of Power, it would have the same basic kind of sound. There'd be a certain archaic structure to it, and it would be delivered with a certain kind of an emphasis, but the content of it is absolutely not there. J.R.R. Tolkien fought in the trenches in World War I. He faced all of World War II. J.R.R. Tolkien had an incredible experience of life. He wrote the languages before he wrote the books. So he's a guy who spent 50, 60 years working on this thing. And now you hand it off to somebody who spent maybe 5 hours working on the thing, and they don't have it, right? They don't. They don't allow their characters to become weak because they think that makes them look weak, when in fact it makes them look human. It's the characters overcoming their weaknesses that makes a character interesting. And when your character is perfect out of the gate, that is the living definition of a Mary Sue. And a Mary Sue, people hate Mary Sues because they're boring and they're unbelievable. Boring and unbelievable. That's pretty much it. I don't believe it, plus I'm bored. This woman who's never been inside a spaceship before, a working one, she plunders, gutted starships for little pieces of tech. She's going to run into this Millennium Falcon, and she's going to fly it better than Han Solo ever did, first time out of the gate. She's never touched a lightsaber before, but she's going to defeat not just a regular guy, not just a stormtrooper, and not just a regular Sith. She's going to defeat the lead bad guy in a battle with a lightsaber, and she's never touched one before. Why? Because she's a strong and powerful woman. That's why. Nobody buys it. Nobody believes it, and nobody likes it, and it's boring. I just don't believe it. Anyway, so that's what it is. That philosophy was in place when X-Files was running, and the writers who grew up during that time, who had begun to be inoculated, or infected, I should say, with this philosophy, took another 10 or 15 years to get to the point where they were able to have enough clout to write a story. And by the way, the people running Rings of Power, most expensive show ever made, I honestly, seriously, when you look at the qualifications of the showrunners, and then the writers, and then the actors, you're thinking, this thing was done for $850,000. That's what Rings of Power looks like to me. In fact, I'm going to just go on a little rant here. Rings of Power looks like it was a low budget, crowd-funded film. By low budget, I mean maybe $2 million, something like that. Everything about Rings of Power is unbelievably awful. And it makes me wonder where the money went. Let's just get rid of the bad writing, because everybody harps about that. Let's just talk about the three rings. Okay? Everybody's seen the shot, the three rings, right? When you saw the rings in Lord of the Rings, the amount of detail and artisanship that went into those rings that Weta put together because of the vision of Peter Jackson and his respect for Tolkien, those rings look like they were not crafted by human hands. Those rings were John Frost, that's a great point. If I forget it, come back to me with that. Those rings were absolutely delicate, and no doubt Peter Jackson found the most talented and exotic jewelry designers in the world and said, I want this ring to have this feel. This is the feel of this ring. This ring has a different feel. And so they all looked fantastic. When you see the three rings at the end of Rings of Power, they're honest to God, I'm not exaggerating, they look like came out of a gumball machine. I mean, they're just appalling. The armor is appalling. The armor looks like the kind of thing that you would buy on Etsy or Alibaba, and it's a $60 Halloween costume thing. There's nothing there. You look at the armor and the clothing in Rings of Power. There is no culture there, right? Peter Jackson knew that the humans had to have a different look than the elves, and the elves had to have a different look than the dwarves. That had to be built into it because we have to believe they're from separate cultures. If we don't believe they're from separate cultures, the whole thing falls apart. So what did he do? He kind of took this human baseline, but they're artistic. These are not savages. You look at the people in Minas Tirith, you look at the soldiers of Gondor, they've got extraordinarily well-crafted, beautiful helmets. They've got beautiful armor, and the officers have the wings and the tree on the front. It is as good as humans are going to get at that time period. It is a civilized human society, right? And it's elegant. Now, let's go to the elves. The elves have taken excellence and made it into an art form. So the armor of the elves is not just functional and it's not just ornamental. It's the pinnacle of ornamental. All of their architecture is a series of extraordinarily pleasing curves. Those are not easy to make, but they've got time on their hands and they've been at it a while. So they want to perfect everything, and everything about the elves looks like the product of perfection because elves are thousands and thousands of years old, and they made their mistakes, before the sun was made. They made their mistakes in the starlight. That's what the Eldar means, people in the stars. So the elves have done that. Now, the other thing that's interesting is what Peter Jackson did with the dwarves. The dwarves were also very ancient, right? It wasn't like they were savages. You couldn't just make them look like orcs because you need orcs to be savages. There's no artistry or skill in the orcs. In fact, it's one of the great scenes about the orcs. One of the most defining moments about the orcs is in Fellowship of the Rings, where they're tearing down the trees and you see these guys just pouring this pig iron into these molds. They don't even have a blade. It's just a spike, right? There's no point in giving them anything better than that because they don't know how to use it. They're just plain hack at things. So when he had a problem with the dwarves, it's like, okay, so we got the elves very elegant. We got the humans that are civilized but look like they're on the earth. What do we do with this ancient, powerful, advanced civilization that nevertheless has to make them look not only different than elves and humans, we also have to make them look a little alien because unlike elves and humans, they live in the ground, under the ground, and they like it. So what they did with the dwarves was they gave them an angular look. Everything about the dwarves is angular, but it's artistic. It's artistic, but it's angular. Everything looks like a support column. All of their helmets and all of their armor, it's all angles. It's all straight lines. Everything the elves have are delicate curves, and the humans are right in the middle. That's what happens when you care about things. And where did the money go? You look at these tunics that these people are wearing. It's unbelievable, right? Now, what's even more interesting than that is how shockingly bad the direction and the casting was. And I'm not talking about the main characters. You look at any scene of Rings of Power that has soldiers in it, and you will see people who have never marched in their lives and don't have the faintest idea about how that works. Right? They just don't have any idea. They just walk. Right? The guys that he got for Lord of the Rings, those were former soldiers. Or at least they were trained by former soldiers. So, all of this stuff is trying to address your point of what happened. What happened was ideology overcame imagination, and dogma overcame talent. You got promoted not because of how talented you were, you got promoted because of how much you could adhere to the dogma. And that's why they don't know how to write. And it's the constraints of their philosophy that doesn't allow them to make simple, dramatic choices that make their characters interesting. They can't do it. They cannot do it. So hopefully that covers that. Talk about squirrels next. Hail Bill from Jacob Belchak. Not exactly sure where to put this, so feel free to dump it if it's more of a politics question. What does it mean to be good? I believe I answered that last Stratosphere Lounge. Admin note, Marusha Dark, topic, Xenobiology in the colonies. Hey, Bill, I was wondering if you've given much consideration to the xenobiology of the colonies beyond just no intelligent aliens. I have. I've been watching a lot of Brett Weinstein and Heather Hailing lately, and they occasionally talk about the consequences of life on other planets. For instance, the idea that any bacteria you encounter would probably kill you instantly since you have no natural immunity to it. Same with alien plants and animals. Short of some technology to process them either internally or externally, you wouldn't be able to eat them since they didn't evolve from the same phylogenetic tree as we did. Even air or water, if outside a certain margin, would be incompatible with what Earthlings evolved to process. This has similar consequences to trying to raise plants and animals we bring with us. Even an Earth-like planet would still need to be heavily terraformed. Okay, so let me answer that because there's more, but they don't seem to be associated with this. I'd love to tell you that what I'm about to say is something I came up with on my own, but it's not. I got this from Traveler. This is from the mind of Mark Miller and a couple of the guys that designed that game. For those of you not familiar with the term, Traveler was a science fiction role-playing game that came out after Dungeons & Dragons, but essentially was the same thing. You've got imaginary characters, and you have floor plans, and you roll your dice, and you have characteristics, and you have a dungeon master, in this case called the referee. And they had such great minds behind that. And I mean a little shop. We're talking about 4, 5, 6 guys. But they had such great imaginations that so much of the stuff that I like and so much of the stuff I'd want to include came pretty much directly from Traveler. I found an email. I tried to find out who owns the rights to Traveler, and I tracked it down. It was Game Designers Workshop, and I got sent off an email. And I got a reply from Mark Miller, who invented Traveler. And I wrote him back and said, I just want to tell you how much your game changed my life and how much thinking it inspired in me and so on. So thank you for that. And then I said, are the CAFERs licensable? He said, yes, they are. So much original thinking in that game, in that universe that they made. I'll just give you a couple of examples relating to biology. They had an alien species, an intelligent alien species called the clichés. And the clichés were herbivores. They're essentially like horses. How do horses have hands? Well, again, it's genius. What they did was they said that this bone in a leg of a horse, extends out, and then 3 fingers evolve, and they grasp the center bone like that. Now, because they're herbivores, they don't have any of the inherent restraints that carnivores have. This is an archaic argument. They don't have the inbuilt restraint that carnivores have, because if carnivores are allowed to behave any way they want to, there are no more carnivores. They just eat each other and destroy each other, right? So carnivores have inhibitors in their behavior. For example, when 2 wolves are fighting for dominance, when one wolf surrenders by going down and presenting his neck to the other one, it deactivates the dominant wolf. It doesn't just take a while to cool down. He just deactivates him. Those are built into predator species, but the clichés are prey species. So they fight with a ruthlessness that is amazing to humans. Also, they're not mammals. They don't have mammary glands. So they feed their kids regurgitated food, the little infants. And I know all this because one of these stories had the cliché ambassador talking to the humans about the time when there was a human observer with cliché troops, and the troops found a bunch of humans and they stomped them to death because they didn't want to waste the ammunition. And this caused the human to vomit, and that's how they feed their kids. And this cliché ambassador thought this was all very funny. Now, over the years, Traveler became Traveler 2300, which was less grand and in a lot of ways in some ways less interesting, in other ways more interesting, but certainly much more realistic. And 2300 dealt with a lot of the issues you mentioned here, Marusha. For example, the protein structure that basically consists of food can spin one way or another. They can either be left-handed. The amino acids can spin left-handed or they can spin right-handed. On Earth, apparently by a coin toss, it spins left-handed. But they assumed that was a 50-50 proposition on every planet that life evolved on. So some of the planets, you could go there and you could eat the animals or whatever, but on some of the planets, not only could you not eat the animals could eat you, but they couldn't digest you. They would starve. The words they used in Traveler was, they would starve to death on a full stomach. They kill you and they taste your blood and all the other things that they like, but they cannot digest the food because their amino acid structure is different. That was great. The Traveler 2300 guys also addressed the issue of this soil acidity, water acidity, and they basically said that one of the most expensive and necessary items that had to be shipped out from Earth to these other planets was what they called pay dirt. And pay dirt was essentially Earth topsoil, about a foot of it. And so the idea would be, if you wanted to plant crops on this planet, you would have to basically, first of all, clear everything, dig down deep, right? Probably put some kind of barriers against, if the plant life or the ground life is too acid or too alkali. But basically, they called it pay dirt, and they brought in, it's heavy and bulky. They brought in topsoil and put it down, then they grew their crops in that. And I thought, that's just bloody brilliant. Really brilliant. I don't remember where did I see this? I'm just trying to remember the name now. Wayne Barlow. He's an artist. He's a concept artist. Barlow put out a book called Barlow's Aliens, where he basically drew aliens from science fiction. I wasn't much impressed with that. But Barlow also put out a book that was one of the most informative and transformative things that I have ever read. It is certainly, without question, in the top 5 of all the books I ever read. And it was called Expedition. And the idea in Expedition was that a group of aliens, highly advanced aliens, come to Earth and cooperate with us and kind of help us out of our troubles, and Earth is dying, that kind of trope. It wasn't a trope back then. This thing's 30 years old at least. So the aliens take some human scientists with them to explore the solar system and a different planet, different star system. And they also decided to take a few artists, because photography is one thing, but they wanted some kind of human expression. So the theme of the book was, Barlow is a human artist who then goes to this planet called Darwin 4, I think, and he catalogs all of the life there. And so essentially it's a coffee table book, because he's a very, very, very good artist. He's very, very good and very, very original. And he's so original that there's so much stuff in Expedition that I would just plain either license or steal. Now, when I say steal, I wouldn't and couldn't. I respect intellectual property, obviously. But he's got a predator called a dagger tongue. And that's an awful lot like the aliens in Big Bad Problem. It has a harpoon in its mouth and just muscle shoots it forward, and then it just sloshes out just cuts the internal organs to bits and just sucks out the liquid. But what Barlow did with this planet was he said that evolution had taken a course where there was these animals didn't have eyes. They were all sonar based. They were all echolocators, and so he got some very interesting looking animals. Number one, and number two, he really had a chance to explore what that meant. Now, Airtucky said Discovery Channel made a miniseries of that book. They did. They made a like a 2 or 3 hour thing. I forget what it was called. Alien Worlds, I think it was called. And it was all done with CG because it would have to be, but the CG was not good. Even for the time, it wasn't good. And they made a critical mistake. I mean, a fundamental error that should have been immediately clear. And that error was they changed the story around a little bit so that instead of humans, there were these artificial probes. And so all of these animals were shot from the air every time, right? Shot from the air. And so since they were shot from the air and since the CG wasn't very good, they looked like small animals. So the thing about Barlow was he would, if there's something big, it looked big. In fact, Barlow has a creature called the Emperor Sea Strider, and it is, I don't know, 30, 40 stories tall. It's a 400 or 500 foot tall thing, at least, I would say, maybe taller. So how do you, now, this is what makes Barlow a genius. Barlow didn't just draw this enormous creature that is utterly unlike anything you've ever seen. But he also had to say, how do you feed this thing? How does a creature that big eat? It can't really bend over. It's largely rigid exoskeleton. How does it eat? And so he postulated that an entire section of the planet, like a quarter of the planet or something, was called the Amoeba Sea, and it was one giant colony of much smaller creatures. And so basically, imagine dropping a jellyfish that covered a quarter of the planet, and all of this jellyfish inside the outer boundary. You could walk on top of it, but inside there were all these complete contained ecosystem. And the sea striders would walk along, and as they would walk, they would shave parts of this highly nutritious gel and suck it up. They ate with their feet. Not with their feet, through their feet. The act of walking is how they fed. So they never stop walking. They're constantly in motion, never stop until they die. And I thought that was so brilliantly thought out. It's just so brilliantly thought out that it wasn't just a big creature, right? It was a big creature, and it had an ecosystem that it depended on, and it had a food supply, and he had all of these different kinds of predators, different kinds of prey. There's a really shockingly good-looking creature called a daggerist, which is a arboreal predator. It just basically climbs up a tree, and its front fingers are like sabers, just jumps on something and hacks it to pieces. And everything in it was just beautifully thought out. So yes, I think about this a lot with the colonies. How do you do? I'm not going to do intelligent aliens because they're just not interesting. If I do them, it will be at such a primitive level that they might be wearing skins and have stone tools. But I'm not even sure about that. Marusha Dark for $5 says, as many of my teachers used to say, good artists copy, great artists steal, the best artists steal from multiple sources to hide their tracks. That's perfect. Perfect. So, where was I? I knew these things were going to be the death of me, these super chats. So anyway, you have to think it out, and that's the thing about, if it's not there, you may not notice it, but if it is there, it has the ring of truth. And it's very, very, very well thought out. And that's why it works. So I'm going to be dealing with the left and right hand amino acids. I'm going to be dealing with the fact that even on the most Earth-like planets, you've still got a lot of issues. I'm actually thinking of, somebody may be able to answer this question for me, but the jewel of the colonies, the Virginia of these worlds is a water world with just a huge number of coral atolls. So all the cities are built on islands, and they're separated by a very shallow sea and a warm sea. And I don't want seasons on this planet, and so I've given it like 1 or 2 degrees of axial tilt. And my question that I can't answer is, somebody can answer it, is if you have a planet that doesn't have an axial tilt, it just spins around like this, what would the temperature gradient be between the poles and the equator if you were just dealing with liquid water? Salt water. So in other words, I don't want ice on this planet, which means that at the poles, it's got to be warm enough so that it's above freezing. If that's the case, then how hot does the water get at the equator? So there's that. And Air Techie says technological civilizations are probably rare. They're extremely rare. I don't think there's any. I would not be surprised if there was if we were the only one in the Milky Way. They are astonishingly rare. Because of the moon, I'm not going to get into that. But not only are they rare, but the problem is that every time they're used, they're just about where we are. Now, obviously, I love my Star Trek, but in Star Trek, you got the Klingons and the Romulans, and their tech levels, that's a traveler term, their tech levels are pretty much identical. In other words, one ship can fight the other. It's not like a U.S. guided missile destroyer going after a Spanish galleon from over the horizon. In other words, they had to be close enough that they could fight. That's why they were there. They were villains. They were conflict. So you have to have not only, I think, much more, an unlikely percentage of aliens that are technological, but their tech level also has to be close to ours. So I'm just not going to do it. I think intelligence is rare. I think life is abundant. I think, although I have some feelings about that now, I think life is probably abundant. I think intelligence is semi-abundant, but technology is extraordinarily rare for any number of reasons that have to do with the unlikeliness of Earth, the unlikeliness of it, the sheer miraculous elements of the formation of Earth. I used to think, as many people still do, that all you had to do was be about the right size and be in the habitable zone, be in the Goldilocks zone, at the orbit where you get enough sunlight to keep water liquid, but not boiling, not too close to it's boiling, and not too far away it's frozen. If you put something in there, you're going to get life, intelligent life, and then technological life. But I don't believe that anymore, and I don't believe that anymore because of what we've learned about the solar system. There are constant extinction level events on Earth that reset the evolutionary clock back to nearly zero. Certainly, if Chicxulub had not happened, there would have been some form of intelligent dinosaurs, and they were kind of on their way, and very likely could have been technological as well. But Chicxulub comes in and wipes them out. So what's so special about that? Well, we get one of those every 100 million years, maybe. And the reason we don't get them every 10 million years or every 5 million years is because the moon. The moon doesn't just block a lot of them. The gravitational effect of the moon either accelerates them out or slows them down. The moon is our shield, and it allows enough time to go by for intelligence and then technology to arrive. Without the moon, you're getting a Chicxulub every few million years, and you just simply end up with primitive life forms because they don't have a chance to get any much more complicated than that. So that's my argument. That's why it's not just my argument. That's why we're not finding any aliens. That's the Fermi paradox. I think the answer is pretty simple. Earth is much, much, much more rare than we originally thought. That the conditions necessary for life to evolve, life to move from the water to the land, that depends on tides. You can't go from the ocean to the land without tides, and you can't have tides without a very large satellite. And that's in itself unusual. And then it stabilizes our axial tilt. Without that, the Earth would eventually do what other planets do over millions of years. They start to tip over and reverse their flow and stuff. So now you've got another thing that's causing extinctions. The core of the Earth is more metallic than you would expect any other planet to be. Because, in other words, if you find an exoplanet that's exactly the same size as the Earth, exactly the same distance from the same kind of star, that planet is almost certainly not going to have the same level of a magnetic core as we do, because of the weird nature of how Earth and the Moon were formed. When that collision occurred between Earth and a planet about the size of Mars, when those two things came together, not only did they add the metallic core of Mars to Earth's, but they blew off all of the lighter silicates. If you look at what the Moon is made out of, the Moon is made out of Earth materials, but just the light ones. So without that impact, you don't have a metallic core that is big enough and hot enough and dense enough to not cool down. When that iron cools down and stops moving, then the magnetic field disappears. When the magnetic field disappears, then we have no protection against the high energy particles and the solar wind, cosmic rays, all that stuff. Without a magnetosphere, the Earth is sterilized. That's what happened to Mars. Mars used to have a metallic core, which gave it a magnetic field, which protected it. And then it was so small that, surface area and volume and stuff it just plain cooled down and stopped. And we didn't. And it was apparently a really near thing in terms of the magnitude. And if we hadn't had that collision with the Moon, that wouldn't have happened. And not only would that have happened, but if you have a planet out there that's exactly like Earth but no Moon, then since you haven't blown away the light stuff and kept the heavy stuff, you essentially don't have any metals to find on the surface. You can't do. The Earth is much more metallic than it should be if it hadn't been for the Moon, because we got the proto-Mars's metal, and we also kicked away a lot of the silicates and all the other stuff. So it's just so many different things. There's so many things. The coincidence of the Earth and the Moon being exactly the same, the Moon, the diameter of the Moon and the Sun being the exact same thing is in itself a coincidence. It's got to be. People say, oh, they come to the solar system to see Saturn. No, they wouldn't. They would come to the Earth to see how beautiful the Earth is, but the thing that would sell them as a tourist attraction would be a total solar eclipse. That would blow their minds, because that Moon and that Sun have to be exactly the same size for this to work. If the Moon is much bigger, you don't get the corona. If it's much smaller, you just get a transit. It's a miracle. And you say, well, what does that have to do with anything? I saw a solar eclipse after waiting my whole life. I saw the one back in 2017. And as soon as I was finished watching that thing, as soon as that sun came back out again, the first thought I had, and I had it for weeks after that, is I want to see this again. The ability to predict eclipses is what developed mathematics among the Incas and Europeans and Chinese. They developed mathematics in order to predict eclipses. And if you don't have a moon that's precisely the right size, then you don't have eclipses to predict. We don't know. All this stuff is all physical stuff, but just consider the psychological, right? With the exception of Pluto and Charon, there is no place in the solar system where you can sit on the surface and see another world out there. Mercury and Venus don't have moons. Mars has tiny little specks, captured asteroids. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune have no surfaces. Pluto, you would see it. It'd be bigger than our moon relative to our moon, but it's too cold out there. Just the fact that the moon exists as an object for wonder is astonishing. And it's no coincidence that 2001: A Space Odyssey, based on Arthur C. Clarke's book, that proto-human, that first 30, 40 minutes of the movie, that ape man proto-human, he has a name, and his name is Moonwatcher. That's his name in the tribe. His name is Moon Watcher, and all he does is sit up at night and look at the moon. He's curious. It's the invention of curiosity. The monolith didn't just bring technology. It selected out curiosity, initiative, applied violence, all that stuff. But there is a solar system not too far away where you can see other planets from the surfaces as if they were the moon. Yes, true, but unless I know how those planets formed, I don't know. If you try to simulate the creation of the moon, it's virtually impossible. It's virtually impossible. The angle has to be a grazing angle, and it has to be just shallow enough. And if you don't, when you run the simulations, you either get atomization or rings, or it all comes back in. To spin out something that's that big is really, really hard. And people are saying, well, Eris is a planet. Yes, but my point is there's no life on Eris, right? What I'm saying is the moon is there after all of these other steps, because after you've got intelligence, now you've got something to look at. Not just look at, you've got something. The moon is phenomenal if you think about it. Let me just deal with this real quick. From Marusha, hey Bill, are you familiar with the grabby aliens hypothesis? It's one possible answer to the Fermi paradox that's unlike anything I've ever heard of, worth looking into. And here's a link which I will click and keep it open, hopefully. Oh no, it took me to, all right, I think I've lost chat. At least I did last time. Yeah, it's gone to YouTube. All right. Hang on a sec. Got that open in a new tab. Now I got to get this thing closed here. Okay, got it. So, all of that to say that, yes, I've considered all of this stuff, and I think we're going to be dealing with it a lot. Okay, we got 3 to go. Chris Taylor, Bill, in your video, Go Save Something Else, you mentioned you were watching a lot of science fiction to get ideas for the colonies. Are you watching or reading any pioneer or frontier stories for inspiration too? I'd suggest that you do so. If not, I'd suggest you do so. Works that might fit with the Frozen Gap season are Islands in the Sky by Ernest Gann, The Long Winter by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and the real-life story history of the 1988 children's blizzard in Nebraska. Now, I've never heard that story. I have read a lot about the come on. I hate this. I'm not going to look because the answer's already there. I'm going to get this one on my own. Donner Party. Island in the Sky was also made into a John Wayne film, but as a pilot, I think you'd prefer the book. A couple of TV shows that should give you plenty of indirect inspiration are the first episodes of both the Disney Daniel Boone series, which I used to watch religiously. I got to be friends with Ed Ames, who was the Indian on Daniel Boone. I watched Daniel Boone every week. I had a coonskin cap. I had my buckskin thing. I had a Winchester rifle. I thought cowboy hats and cowboy guns were a little too precious for me. I was Daniel Boone. And then the Texas John Slaughter series. Neither seem to be on Disney Plus, which should be high praise for that. New Disney crew disowns them. It's probably inappropriate for you to look at it in the middle of the show, but hypertext links to very brief excerpts for you and the rest of the Stratologers to view for nonprofit educational use. In the above sentence, please give them a credit of minutes viewing after the show. Okay. So some of those I've seen. Some of those I've read. I have not read Island in the Sky. And I haven't had time for TV. I've been working like a slave, honestly. But I have seen enough of Yellowstone and the what was the successor, 1860 something or other, and they were great. And Kevin Costner is great, and those shows apparently are doing really well. And I think the reason they're doing really well is because they're dealing with traditional men, actual men. So anyway, I will definitely do some more research. And the nice thing too is that we can always kind of, accept good ideas and incorporate them as time goes on and so on. I just want to get back to it real bad. I've got a lot to do between now and then, including I've got to get this How Not to Be an Idiot series going. Okay, Kyle Brand. Hello, Bill. I've been listening to all of your shows for a long time, but I haven't written any questions yet. Well, I'm glad you did, Kyle. Thank you. Just wanted to say that I've become a bit cynical about our media and culture recently. Me too. Nothing ever seems to catch my interest or excitement anymore in new movies or shows. Even the things that get good reviews on Doomcock and Erotic or the like doesn't get me motivated enough to go and watch it. The first whiff of the pungent stench of The Message just takes me right out of the entertainment experience. Like, well, here we go again. I paid good money to be preached into insanity. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to put on these spectacles for this. It's getting a little late here. Even the stuff that does not hit well with the likes of our favorite reviewers has a tinge of nose pinching just to finally have something to watch. I'm done giving good money to pinch my nose. Yeah, amen. The first thing that has filled this void for me since 2020 is the founding of the Stratosphere Studios with the Colony series. Well, thank you. Series focused on hope and optimism again. Yes, optimism and hope. Written with love and passion, not to break the mold, but to eliminate the concept of the mold altogether. No more cookie-cutter messaging, entertainment based on algorithms and metrics and wearing skins of our heroes, but true imagination and artistry. I've called you Roddenberry 2.0 before, and I haven't said that lightly, and I don't take it lightly. It's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said about me. His work is your inspiration your entire life, and you strive to capture the essence he once gave us. I feel like you have analyzed this essence perfectly, making me exceedingly excited about this universe. So now for my question. Any thoughts on eventually making a tabletop game for this universe once it is complete enough to have one? Very similar to the questions above. First of all, Kyle, thank you for the very kind words. That means an awful lot to me. I mean, more than I can say. It is a long slog sometimes, and these kind of things just really cheer me up. Hope and optimism. I'll tell you something. It's if you go to YouTube and Google science fiction movies, science fiction shorts, right? I'll bet you 9 out of 10 of them are predicated on the idea that we either have to leave the Earth or Earth is a barren wasteland because of what we did to our mother. Mother Earth took care of us, and we, the greedy, rebellious children, in exchange for her giving us life, we just killed Earth, and we did it on purpose, and this is what we get, and it's what we deserve. I saw one just a couple days ago where it's like, it's the last humans on Earth, and then finally somebody dies, and then you see a human skeleton next to a rusting away car, and plants have almost completely covered it, and in come dinosaurs, and the world is back the way it should be because humans have gone. And this is in everything. It's in every single short I've ever seen, virtually every short I've seen on YouTube. It's in virtually every major science fiction movie I've seen. It's Avatar, which I think I have no interest in seeing, really. I don't need to be lectured to about these aliens that live on a planet where they swim with, there are no predators on that planet. They're swimming with these gigantic creatures, and then just stop. Okay, just stop. This idea that the Earth is about to die is so blatantly false. It's just the worst case scenario with this carbon thing, assuming they're right, and I'm not convinced at all that they are, the worst case scenario is that it gets warmer and sea levels rise somewhat. When it gets warmer, people, it's going to get hotter there. Yes, it's true. It's going to get hotter at the equator. It's going to get warmer up near Canada, where all of this great farmland is. Well, 100,000 people die of heat every year, but 400,000 people freeze to death every year, and on and on and on it goes, right? It's simply absurd. This idea that we're going to kill the planet. If we've only got 6 years to do it, too, only 6 years, and after that, it's just going to happen, right? What an absurd, ridiculous thing to say. This is why I did Go Save Something Else. I wasn't going to argue about that. I wasn't going to argue about the temperature change because it's pointless. It's not the point. The point is that you could get to, we're talking about, you get to 450 parts per million, it's game over. Well, it was 3,000 parts per million before, and there was life everywhere. So it's just plain lying, and they know it. They know it's lying. Humans aren't killing the planet. Now, there was a period in our adolescence when we were actually making a lot of mess, but at least the bright kids have not only cleaned that mess up, they're cleaning up other people's messes too. I have a lot of problems, needless to say, with the government of California, and just don't even start me. However, when I got here in 1988, the worst day I have seen here in the last 10 years in terms of smog, the worst day I've seen here is better than the best day I saw in the summer when I got here in 1988. The air pollution in Los Angeles, it's gone. It's just not here anymore. It's just plain gone. There is no air pollution in Los Angeles. None. There isn't any. And that's because we cleaned it up. And the Great Lakes used to be poisonous pits filled with mercury. They cleaned it up. Cuyahoga River caught fire my senior year in high school. No. Earth is cleaner. It's greener than it's been since humans have been in space taking pictures of it. And all of this is just plain hysteria. And we're at the point now where people are destroying paintings and they're assaulting people because they've been convinced that we have 6 years to live and so on. And I would just like to hear even the biggest advocates. And nobody, by the way, you notice that nobody's ever asked this question. And I'd like to ask this question. Okay, Greta or Al or whoever else, right? Joe, if we don't get this carbon under control in 10 years, it's going to be the end of the world. So let's just say that we don't. Let's say that we don't get our carbon under control. Let's say, in fact, that we actually put more carbon in the atmosphere. We go back to the kind of carbon emissions we had 20 years ago. Earth is going to die. That's what you're telling me. Explain to me how this works. Describe the process. You notice they've never done that, right? Have you noticed that? Earth is going to, planet's going to die. Planet is dying, and if we don't do something, then the planet's going to die. Or it's going to be dead. It's too late. Okay. Describe the process of how the Earth dies. I want to hear it. Well, temperatures were warmed by 2 degrees. And that's going to kill the Earth? It was 8 degrees warmer 80 million years ago. How is it going to kill the Earth? Well, sea levels will rise. Okay. And granted, that's not a good thing. But how does that kill the Earth? How? It doesn't. It doesn't. So, since this had to do with the colonies, I am never, ever, ever going to have a moment in there where Earth was ever in any danger whatsoever, and I'm not going to have any higher sea levels either. I'm just not. I'm going to have people want to get out of Earth, all right, don't you worry. But the reason they're going to want to get out of Earth is not because the Earth is dead. They want to get out of Earth because the Earth is nothing but a red tape scenario of horrific proportions. It is Ingsoc. It is George Orwell. It is just plain awful. Rich Hallquist, sorry about the name, doesn't do a dang thing. It's been worse. Yes, it's been... You can't even say worse, Rich. Different. I keep coming back to this, but it needs to be keep coming back to. If you stood on the inland ocean that was the middle of this country, sea levels are 200 feet higher or whatever. If you stood where Kansas is now, 80 million years ago, you would have seen life everywhere. Thousands of different species. Just constant motion, right? But since carbon dioxide levels have dropped so precipitously low, now it's just a bunch of grass out there. It's like you need to get out of where you are and look at the thing from geostationary orbit. The amount of biosphere and life decreased when the Earth got cooler and the sea levels went down to the level we're at now. Decreased. Blank Frankie says, I don't buy their concern that we're all going to die since they clearly hate humanity and themselves. That's the worst of it. They have taught entire 2 generations now, not just that the planet's going to die, but that we're the ones who murdered it, and that we're the worst creatures in the world, and that we're essentially a cancer, and the best thing you can do for the planet is not to have any kids. And we go on and on and on. It's the ultimate lever. If you think about this, you think about take climate change away from modern culture, and what have you got? Nothing. You got nothing in terms of this lever, right? If you could take climate change off the table, then you don't have any. Why are energy prices so high? Get all the oil you want to. This is what I believe, by the way. No, we're going to do this because if we don't, we're all going to die. And no, you don't have to spend an entire advertising campaign talking about how if you just leave your towels on the floor, you'll save the planet. No. It's all predicated on this. Whether or not the numbers that they are presenting are accurate, and I have opinion on this, but whether they're accurate or not doesn't matter. Their worst case scenario is so far below the historical highs, it's not even, you cannot achieve them. Right? You couldn't get to 3,000 parts per million carbon, which is what it was for millions and millions and millions of years. You cannot get there, even if you tried. So, it's a death wish. It's a death wish from neurotics who, well, it's the definition of a neurotic. Character disordered people blame everybody else for whatever happens, and neurotics blame themselves for everything that happens. Blank Frankie again, I don't buy their concern that we're all going to die since they clearly hate humanity and themselves. I might have just read that. I spaced it out. Yes, they think it's a good thing. And I want to get away from people like that. I want to get as far away from people like that as possible. Because what they're doing, the reason that these 2-3 generations now believe this is because the people who have taken over the education system want entire generations to be comfortable with less. Not only comfortable with less, but to have less will be virtue for them, right? Give up your car, give up your heating, give up this, give up meat, give up everything, go back to eating bugs on the dirt. That's virtue for them. And that is in the interest of some people who I notice are not living in dirt houses and not eating insects. It's as obvious as it can be. When you hear people like Bill Gates and movie stars talking about we should be eating insects. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get you used to the idea of eating insects, right? Because they want to be eating steak while you eat insects. That's what drives it. It's just plain aristocracy. Their problem with us is not that we're too poor. The elites don't hate us, the middle class, because we're poor. They hate us because we're successful, because we are essentially not much different than they are. If Bill Gates has $100 billion, right? He has thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times multiples of how much money I have. But he doesn't live millions of times better than I do. He's got a house that's nicer than my house. And his car is nicer than my car. And he probably has several of them. But I still have air conditioning, and I still got 360 horses if I really want to step on the thing. They can't stand the fact that the success of the middle class through the free market has reduced the difference between the way the elites live and the way the hoi polloi lives to the point where there's essentially no real difference. Right? If Bill Gates and I and a homeless guy, all three of us, get hit by the same bus at the same time, then we're all three going to the same hospital. We're going to get the same treatment. That's intolerable to them. Intolerable to them. The reason that there's feces on the streets of San Francisco is because Gavin Newsom wants people to walk among feces because he doesn't have to. And thank you very much for that, Mr. G. Vanderleen, or Ms., or Mix. I'm assuming it's not Mix. $20 super chat. Thank you. Just a donation. Very nice. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So it's like this stuff is so obvious, and people look. It's really is a mental illness, and it's a pithy statement, and it's got a nice ring to it. Liberalism is a mental illness. Find a cure. This kind of thing, right? But it's not something to joke about. It is a mental illness, and it's not a particularly exotic or rare mental illness. It is neuroses. They are neurotic. They're neurotic because their policies have destroyed the family. They did not get the love and support they needed in the first 4 or 5 years of their life, and so they have no emotional core, and they assume that everything revolves around themselves, narcissism and neurotics. And so all of the policies that are based on leftism are products of neuroses. And guilt, which is part of neuroses. Character disordered people don't feel any guilt because they didn't do anything. Oh, somebody else's fault. It's just plain nut jobs who are good at communicating and convincing all of us that we should be part of their same mental illness. I mentioned at the beginning of the show I'm going to be doing the Don't Be an Idiot about flying. And in order to show the power of air, I know it sounds like it's an hour long. Believe me, I'll get this really nice and tight. I'm going to say to the Batmobile, and we're going to get in the Camaro. We're going to get on the freeway, and I'm going to roll down the window, and I'm going to hold my hand out, and I'm going to say, okay, we're doing 70 miles an hour. By the way, the thing I like most about this car is there's a little switch here. It's a software thing, and if I rock this thing up 3 positions, it changes the timing of my engine so that the car emits 6 times more carbon than it would otherwise. I usually just keep it right there. So that's about all I have to say about that. But nevertheless, it's all aristocracy, and elitism is aristocracy. And America's done a pretty good job of eliminating aristocrats. And that bothers them quite a bit. All right, here we go. Last question. 3 hours already. Good Lord. Cody Fett. Bill, I'm sorry I haven't been able to catch the last few Stratosphere studios. We've missed you, Cody. Been looking for you. I switched jobs, and now I'm working 4 10-hour shifts a week. And on the East Coast, that means no Monday shows, but now I can watch the Thursday shows. First of all, good for you, man. 4 10-hour shifts is a 40-hour week, but it's a brutal way to go through it. Part of why I'm sorry is that while on politics I agree with you on just about everything political, but when it comes to the realms of fiction, I don't think I could disagree with you more on many issues, and disagreement makes for good television. Cody, you're dead to me. So here's one of the big disagreements that I hopefully will one day hear your response to, but which should make good TV in the meantime. I feel the same way about the constant lectures about why women warriors are bad from conservatives today as I felt about the constant lectures about why women with agency are good from liberals a decade ago. It's annoying, angering, and some small part makes sense, and the thing that is cheesing me off the most is the feeling of shame I get from the constant social proof that how I'm writing my stories is wrong and it ain't right. A writer like me should be able to write a story with a woman who's just the love interest of the male lead without some wokest trying to hit me over the head, and I should be able to write an action girl without the rightist crawling up my backside about it, both telling me the whole time about how I'm a terrible, awful person for writing the way I do. I know this isn't the sort of environment you're trying to foster, Bill, but this is the result nonetheless. And while I'm on the subject of action girl, why in the world do you keep talking about the trope as if it's meant to appeal to college women Democrats when it's actually supposed to appeal to men? The whole point of action girl is that the archetype appeals to the male fantasy of a woman who's interested in the same things that men are, just like the Greek girl or the tomboy or the gamer girl and so forth. And yes, I'm aware that all of the writers in Western entertainment who say that women warriors are supposed to cater to female audiences, but they're idiots who have spent significant parts of their career flushing money down the toilet, so that shows how accurate they are. Now, the biggest issue I have with all of this is that between the people shouting strong female character and the people shouting no women warriors, the impression that one gets is that women should not be included in fiction under any circumstances or for any reasons, because no matter where you turn, you're going to get flack. And that sucks because it's just a further extension of the attitude of despair and polarization that covers everything in a society like a death shroud. Anyway, that's all I have to say on the subject. I don't like these longer comments, my natural writing style, but I know you don't like them, and it makes me feel unwholesome. Still, you somehow managed to get some good TV out of this. All right, so let's see about this. First of all, if you were to write a woman action character, I'm relatively convinced that it would be a pretty good woman action character. You're not being fair to me when you say that I'm against women action characters, because I've said many times that I think that Ripley and Sarah Connor and a bunch of others, Janeway, they're fine, they're great, right? I don't have any problem with women warriors. I don't have any problem with women who fight. What I do have a problem with is I have a problem with women who weigh less than their armor, beating the hell out of gigantic men, because it's a lie, Cody. It's not real. It doesn't happen. It cannot happen. It's a lie. When you're talking about Action Girl, if you're talking about the same thing I am, you're talking about somebody like this Galadriel, who's a little wisp of a creature, hacking through guys and pushing them into cells. If you believe that that is the kind of writing you want to do, then yes, we definitely disagree. That is not only bad writing, it's a lie. It's a lie. It's just not true, and everybody knows it. Now, if you're saying that you think that I don't think there can be women warriors, you have grossly misunderstood me, right? There are some terrific women who do what they do and are great characters, but they're great characters because their motivations come from a believable place. You'll notice I didn't say a masculine place. I said a believable place. Ripley doesn't want to go back into the hive, but she goes because her surrogate daughter is in there. And that's why you love Ripley, not because she went in there to kick some ass. Look at the difference between that and this incarnation of Galadriel. What does she do? All she does is ride around all day, all year, for thousands of years, slaying orcs, because her mission is to kill all the orcs in the world. She wants it. She loves it. Ripley didn't, I'm going to go to this planet, I'm going to exterminate every one of those things. She basically did the exact opposite. She says, if I go, is there going to be any protection for me? You got guys with guns between me and this thing, because I don't ever want to see one of these things again. And we are going to go kill it, right? So she becomes an action hero from a believable place. Galadriel is the kind of character I'm talking about because it is unbelievable. It's just not believable. It's not believable that she could take on these creatures. Not believable that the rest of the soldiers of Numenor don't know how to do a sword fight. She's got a bunch of teenagers, look like they just walked out of Starbucks. She got like 6 or 7 guys and a girl, and they're all kind of doughy and pasty. And she's showing them hold the sword up to their neck. You see, it's not about your arm. It's about your feet. And then she does some kind of weird. It's just plain awful. And when I see Scarlett Johansson or whatever taking down guys and beating them up, no, it's a lie. It doesn't happen. Now, if that's the kind of action girl you're talking about, then yes, we definitely disagree about this, and that's the way it goes. But me talking about this and having conservatives talk about it, we're not talking about the fact that you can't make a good female character, and we're not saying you can't make a good female action character. What we're saying is that the stuff that they're putting out is so much of a lie that it is offensive to our sense of reality, in the same way that pronouns is offensive. The same way that, in the same exact way that somebody's saying, I identify as a woman, therefore I am a real woman. I don't believe that. And you probably don't either. But that's what we believe. That's what we're fighting against. Right? So all I'm against is lies in the form of fiction. And it's a dangerous lie. It does 2 things that are very dangerous. Number 1, it convinces young girls that they can fight their way with men, and that's not something they want to test in practice. And number 2, it takes away from men their natural role in life, which is to be violent and to be good at it. That's why we're so much faster and stronger and smarter than women are. We're smarter. We're certainly stronger, we're certainly faster, we're smarter, and we're also stupider. If you look at the actual IQ breakdowns and look at the extremes on the ends, what you find is that at the extreme end you find men are more intelligent and they're also more stupid. And that makes sense because evolution can experiment with males, because they're essentially expendable. That's why we're expendable. So, pointing out Linda Carter's Wonder Woman and all the rest of it. This is the thing that is so false to me. And when they did that version of, I don't remember, was it Battlefield or Medal of Honor? They did the World War II version, and the main character was I'm not making this up, she was a one-armed woman. and she was leading the teams into battle. Now, if that's the kind of character you want to write, knock yourself out, pal, and go for it. But I suspect that's not the kind of character you're wanting to write. And if you're saying, no, I want to write a believable action figure, and you think I disagree with you, you have missed something I've said along the way, right? I'm protesting the lie, and I'm protesting the continual, endless repetition of this dangerous and unnatural idea that women can beat men up, because it's just not true. It's just not true. Now, can a 98-pound woman shoot 15 big men? Absolutely that she can. That's why I'm in favor of firearms. That's why I think it's all pretty much accessible. I have friends who are female pilots in the Army, helicopter pilot, and she does her job remarkably well. I've seen the Thunderbirds usually have a female officer now. I don't see the number 4 airplane drifting out of position because it's being flown by a woman, because that's a believable thing. But if you tell me that you're going to write a woman who is going to physically beat up a man, I would have to point you to, what is its name? Is it Leah Thomas? Who came in first by 35 seconds. Not 3.5 seconds, not 0.35 seconds, 35 seconds from the second place person, right? That's the physical difference between men and women. That's the best swimmers in the world. And this he's the 500 ranked male. It just goes on and 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 on, right? I'm not against women. I'm not against women who fight. I know women who fight. I'm against the lie. I'm against the lie. Now, if you've got an action figure who's a fighter pilot, female, I'm in. Well, I don't know if I'm in. Depends on how she's written, but in any event, it's not excluded. I'm just talking about this endless, nonstop requirement that not only do they have to beat men up, but we talked about this earlier. Their idea of leadership, their idea of masculinity is arrogance and rudeness because they don't have it. They don't. That doesn't mean it's not possible for some women to get it. There have been many women that served in the military. There are many women, we talked about them earlier too, Ursula K. Le Guin and D.C. Fontana and a number of others, who can write this stuff because they've got the experience and they've got the freedom to be able to say, yes, of course I'm writing a woman character. I'm writing a human being. I'm not writing a template. And the characters I'm complaining about are not complaining about them because they're women. I'm complaining about them because they are ridiculous and one-dimensional. Mikey Spock, Michael Burnham on Discovery, she's not only Space Jesus, but she's also Spock's half-sister or adopted sister. No. Ray, who's never been in a spacecraft in her life, outflying Han Solo in the Falcon. No, it's a lie. I don't believe it. So it's all a question of where you're going to come from with this thing. And I suspect that you're not going to write the kind of character that would bother me. But if it turns out that you do, then that's fine. We disagree about that. But I don't see this as, you say that the liberals are saying that all women are warriors and the conservatives are saying no women are warriors. That's paraphrasing your position, right? Well, what does reality tell you? I mean, when you look out there, what does reality tell you? You want to write about something that has truth in it, right? That's what writers do, presumably. What does reality tell you? I'm not aware of any women that are in the shooting end of special forces. And a great example of these two opposites working together was in O Dark 30, right? You had this female intelligence officer who had the credibility. She believes that bin Laden is in this complex, and when she goes and talks to the SEALs, there's a line there that's fantastic where she says, we think he's in this compound. And some other guy says, well, speaking to another male SEAL, said, what makes you believe this? And he says, I believe it because she believes it. So she's got her credentials. But the point is, she doesn't get on the helicopter and kick down the doors, right? That's the point. That's why it works. That's why it's real. There's nothing that Scully ever did, ever, that I can think of that I found to be unbelievable in terms of reality, right? I never saw her punching out 200-pound guys. I saw her draw her gun a couple times. So there you go, right? It's just that simple. I just think that it's time we just had to accept the fact that there is, in fact, a biological reality. And even at the far ends of the margins, you still don't have, it is physically impossible for a 100-pound woman to beat up a 250-pound man, especially if he's a soldier or a guard. I don't care how talented she is. I don't care how much kung fu she's got. I don't care about any of that stuff. It's just plain not true. P7 2017 says, Bill Whittle, what happened to the woman who qualified to go to Buds? I don't know. Qualifying to go to Buds is not the same as graduating from Buds. That I do know, because I've seen that documentary. Many of you have seen it too. And I'm looking at these guys, and when I could probably do that, I could probably do that. And then I see them freezing in the ocean, and lifting the logs. Like, no, I'm out. I don't like cold water. So qualifying to be in there is one thing. Getting in there is something else. And I'm not making this up. This isn't me just being nasty. Tanks that should be done, but if you want you to fix them. Here we go. U.S. Marines, September 25th, 2017. Today, the first female Marine graduated from infantry officer course. Okay, graduating from infantry officer course is not the same as graduating from Buds. It's not even close. Anyway, if you hear that so often that it annoys you, then the only thing I can say about it is I'm seeing it so often that it annoys me, and it's getting worse. First time chat from, and this is it. We're done. I'm done with all the questions, so I just get this out of the way. Yama135 Twitch Zer. Hi, I want to offer promotion of your channel. Viewers, followers, views, chatbots. The price is lower than any competitor. The quality is guaranteed to be the best. Also, auto on, incredibly flexible and convenient. Order management panel. Everything is in your hands. Turn it on, off. Customize Google dog hype. Well, my willingness to take you up on your offer is dented somewhat by your inability to form complete sentences in English. That does not inspire a high level of confidence in me, so I'm going to have to say hard pass on that one. All right, let's get out of here. I need to go home. And that's what we'll do. So the show's made possible by the members of BillWhittle.com who part with their hard-earned money. It's getting harder to earn every day. But they keep the lights on here, and we never end a show without thanking them because we thank them, because they deserve it. We'll be back Thursday, I think. Eric says Facebook next time. I don't know. We'll see. I guess that's about it. So anyway, we'll be here Thursday for the Stratosphere Lounge. We'll hopefully be back next Monday. I expect to have at least some kind of renders. I know I'm working on 2% or 1% of my available time, but I just do it sometimes just because I need to. And I'm looking forward to doing these Don't Be an Idiot series, because I think, despite the fact that it takes me an hour to talk about them, I think those ideas are really sound and unique. So we'll see how tight we can get this. Okay, so everybody have a great couple days, and we'll see you on Thursday.